Right. Kia ora koutou, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to today's Kaipara District Council Extraordinary Funded Projects Committee meeting. It's nice to be able to be joining you today on the 9th of February 2022, and just over 3 years ago, we had the announcement of all of the PGF money, and that was in 2019. That was announced to us all, and in early February, and that was a week and a day and 3 years ago. So we've come a hugely long way, and today's agenda is very much built around all of that. So it's wonderful to be able to join you today. I'm just going to open today's meeting with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapu pounamu te moana, hei ho rahi ma tātou I te rangi nei, araha mai tātou ia tātou katoa. For today's meeting, I would also like to introduce our new project manager lead for this work, who's Vibeka Wright, who is joining us here at Kaipara District Council, but was in fact working for Kanoa or the PGF back in the day, and so actually knows us and knows our projects very well. So it's wonderful that you're able to be joining us. Vibeka, thank you, and because Joe Reid has gone on maternity leave. So for those watching the continuity of the last of these committee meetings and those prior to that, we now have Vibeka here in our key lead contact role for the elected members and the community regarding all of these projects. So with regards to this, I'm calling at this point for apologies for today's meeting, and I know of no apologies. We have everyone present except Councillor Larson, but I don't believe he's apologised. Tracy, Dean, has he apologised? Is there an apology?
Not at this stage, no. Okay,
thank you. So we will just proceed that there are no apologies at this point. Thank you. Moving on to item number 1.3, the confirmation of the agenda. We have a comprehensive agenda for this afternoon. I would like to move the confirmation of the agenda that we'll be discussing, and I'm seeking a seconder for that, Councillor Wilson-Collins. Seconding that, thank you. Is there any discussion on this item at this point? No discussion, thank you. So we're putting this to the vote now regarding the confirmation of the agenda. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. So moving on to item number 1.4, the conflict of interest declaration. Elected members, are there any conflicts of interest for today's items to be declared? Councillor Wills.
The Kaihu cycleway.
Thank you.
As a landowner affected by it.
Thank you. The Kaihu Valley Trail project. Thank you. Are there any other conflicts of interest? None. Thank you. Thank you. So we're moving on now to the minutes of the last of these committee meetings, the confirmation of the open minutes from the 9th of December 2021. I'm seeking a mover for these minutes as a true and accurate record. Councillor Curnow, thank you, and a seconder for that, Councillor Vincent. Thank you. Is there any commentary regarding these minutes? No commentary, thank you. All right, we'll put this to the vote now regarding the confirmation of the open minutes from the 9th of December. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Very good. So we'll move on with the content of our meeting today regarding, and the first of those being the Kaihu Valley Trail item. And Councillor Wills is noted has a conflict of interest here. But there's a recommendation here to note the Kaihu Valley Trail project update for February. And
I will
Councillor
move that,
Curnow.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Thank you. So Councillor Curnow had her hand up. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, are you happy to second this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely. So that's put onto the table. Thank you. So Vibeke, kia ora. So how this works now is there's a brief opportunity for you to provide an update to us based on the written report. And if there are any further subsequent updates since the report was written and the agenda compiled, and then the elected members will, of course, ask questions for clarification of regarding the project, and then we move into a speech making process after that. So thank you. So Vibeke, over to you to give us an update here regarding the Kaihu Valley Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand that the tried and true method is that the report can be taken as read, and that I can address any updates. I don't have any particular updates on this project since the agenda item was published, just noting that the schedule is now at amber. Discussions with DOC are continuing. There is also an emerging issue surrounding the Te Hohonga my apologies, Te Hohonga Marae, just with some issues around the route there, but those matters are being discussed and being progressed. So that being the case, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So elected members, questions here regarding the Kaihu Valley Trail. We'll go to Councillor Curnow, then Councillor Wethy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vibeke. I'm just interested in maybe understanding a little bit more about the concerns that the marae have about cyclists using that road. Just what's going on in there.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. My understanding is that the marae is very close to Station Road, so right next to where the path it was intended to go. And clearly, if there are events at the marae, say a tangi, or people are being karanga onto the marae, there's potentially an issue with cyclists going by at certain times. So looking at various options there, the marae has indicated that they want a complete route change, which the project manager has looked at and is not really going to be that feasible. That involved going up Hokianga Road. So we are discussing other options to just see if maybe the path can switch to the other side of the road. So it's very much an open question at this stage, but clearly looking to find some sort of resolution so that the path can continue, but without disrupting activities at the marae.
Okay,
but certainly hope to make some progress on that in the next month.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's good to understand exactly what the concerns were, and yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wethy, then Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I guess that was the one that the new bit of information that raised my eyebrows a wee bit, because I can understand they may have concerns, but of course any change in the route that they may find acceptable also sets a precedent that if there's other stakeholders that have got buildings, etc., close to the roadway, which has been designated as part of the route, then they could have equal claim to want a deviation as well. So, it is a public road, and I guess there's been many occasions when they've had tangi and other occasions at the marae when there's been a reasonable amount of traffic going by, and I just wonder whether there's a great deal of difference there. I think we've got to be mindful that whatever we do here could actually set precedents, and that's something that we've got to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a statement, not a question. Councillor Wethy, yes?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. No question there. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, question, please.
Yes. How is our iwi liaison team working with Te Hoonga Marae on this issue? My first question.
Through you, Your Worship, I don't actually know the answer to that question at this stage. I am on my ninth day with Kaipara District Council, so while I know that the discussions are being escalated and had elsewhere, I'm not sure of who are actually involved. But I will follow up and get back to you.
Through your worship, I can clarify that I'm actually meeting with Snow Tane and Louise Miller next week and we'll discuss this matter. But we've also had some initial discussions with Steve Mutton of NZTA, so he's looking at the other proposals that the Marae has made, and yeah, he's fairly hesitant as well. Sees it's far more safe going on a public road than creating a separate path. But we'll be having a chat with Snow next week.
Thank you.
So I have two more questions. Given that you're early to this role, Rebecca, can you tell us or talk a bit about what the opposition to the use of Station Road might mean for the viability of the trail itself?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to come to that. I mean, we can't be stopped utilising a public road, just like Councillor Wethy has said. If that's what, after discussion with the Marae and NZTA, and they're looking at the safety, then we're trying to do everything we can. We've offered trees, we've offered fencing, so just a bit more about talking, a bit more talking with them. But I can't see that that there may be a viable alternative to using the public road.
Indeed. And my final question is from my memory of visiting Te Hoonga Marae, the actual railway itself runs adjacent to the marae, and I was wondering why, seeing as it's a rail trail, or it was the rail trail, why, and is it an option to actually put the start of the trail on the rail line itself?
Through you, Your Worship, the situation is that portion of the rail trail is actually leased out by Kiwi Rail to a small commercial business running rail tours. So that portion of the rail trail is in fact a rail line which is in use.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess on the same story, in the discussions with those marae, has the discussion involved talking around what the economic opportunities that might arise from having the rail trail going close by them? Question mark?
Through you, Your Worship, I have not personally been involved in any of those discussions myself. I did raise that with one of the staff involved in the project management, and it was acknowledged that that had, was one of the considerations, but it doesn't appear that this particular marae is looking at the cycle path in those sort of terms. But I can double check on that for you and report back.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there further questions, elected members here? Councillor Delavaris Woodcock, you have a further question? On mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I did see in the report that there was a hui on the 18th of January, and I was wondering, Rebecca, what or who among the project team attended the hui?
Through you, Your Worship, I would need to come back. I would need to research that and come back to you. I'm on my 9th day with Kaipara District Council, so what occurred in August, I'm afraid, is a little beyond me at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions, elected members? No further questions. I thank you. So Vibeke at this point, so you can relax on this point, just for now. Thank you. And we'll go to Councillor Curnow for a statement. Thank you.
It's just good to see that there's progress happening. I think there's an old proverb that the harder the journey, the better the destination. So that hopefully this will be a remarkable cycle trail when it's there, because we've certainly, it's been there have been challenges along the way. But I believe that there's the blessing tomorrow morning, is that right? To begin the project. So yeah, that's it will be good to see shovels going in the ground and signs going up. But yeah, thank you, team.
Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, statement is the second.
Yes, I basically support what Councillor Kaihu has said, especially the destination being much better for the challenges along the way, and all the challenges along the way are important and real. And I understand that the spiritual area of the marae needs to be accorded utter respect, and that there needs to be real dialogue with the marae and the people about how we can get a win-win. And as Councillor Vincent's question led into the subject of the extensive benefits among the community, of which Te Haunga Marae is very much part of, I am sure that the discussions will unfold as these issues come up, because it's something that's taking shape, and as we have the blessing tomorrow, it seems that despite all the obstacles we have met, budget and stakeholders and access and easements, we're still having a blessing tomorrow, which is a miracle for me. And so I wish the process well. Thank you.
Thank you. Further statements from elected members here. Councillor Joyce Paki.
Kia ora. Kia ora e te whānau. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks very much for that update. It's interesting to hear about Te Hauhanga. Good on them for putting forward their thoughts or concerns to work with. I'll be really keen to see how we get around mitigating some of their concerns, and that's what we're here for, is to listen and respond. So yeah, ke te pai tira, that's awesome.
Thank you. Further statements. Councillor Wills.
And just my statement is just briefly is that this is not the first marae. It's not a setting a precedent. The Taita marae has also indicated it won't accept the cycleway going past its front gate for similar reasons, and that's actually been acknowledged by the cycleway developers. So this is not the this is not the first marae to raise these concerns and have them addressed. It's just part of the process. So I just want to share that if there was a thought that this was the only marae that has been involved in the process to date. That's all. Otherwise, I'll keep my comments to myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Further statements. A brief statement from me. Again, thank you for the update, as we've heard, and I'm keen for this project to continue proceeding. 10 days ago, I was for the first time ever on the Otago Rail Trail, and and it's extraordinary what that piece of infrastructure is doing to remote areas in the back blocks of Otago regarding economic development. And I look forward to economic development on from the grassroots up and the flex roots up in the Kaihu Valley as well as we go forward. So it's a very, very significant time, and I have every confidence that the next steps of this project will continue the great momentum that's already here. Thank you. Any further statements? Back to Councillor Curnow.
So nothing further to add.
Nothing further. Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, we'll put the noting of this report to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Vibeke. Moving on to the next item, the Kaiwaka footbridges. So Councillor Wethy is moving this and Councillor Curnow is seconding this. Thank you. So that's onto the table. Vibeke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have any other updates to offer on this report, other than note that the amber risk regarding the asbestos has been attended to, but otherwise the project is going well, so happy to take any questions.
So just for clarity there, so that was the only amber risk we had, so everything else is now green, yes?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct.
Yay, here's to lots of green lights. Thank you. Thank you, that's a good start. Councillor Curnow, question.
Yes, when just delving into the issue of the asbestos boards, could you just let us know what attended to means? Have they been removed or buried, or how were they attended to?
Through you, Your Worship, I understand that they have been covered up, which is consistent with the professional advice that was sought on how to deal with them. So, yep.
Thank
you. Thank you. And Tracy, excuse me, seconded by Councillor Curnow. Thank you. Sorry, so further questions from elected members here? So at this point, I do have a question, and it's about the opening event, if you like, March 22, it's saying, which is now next month. So I guess my simple question is, if this is the project opening event, at what point would we actually have a clear date in view on that? Is it still likely to be March? Vibeke.
That is my understanding, but I will double check on that and get some more specifics for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there further questions for clarification from elected members on this item? No questions. Thank you. Statements. Councillor Wethy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, pleased to hear that the asbestos issue hasn't caused any delay, because it sounds as if it was cement asbestos board, which, as you quite rightly point out, Rebecca, has been dealt with appropriately. I went past the northernmost bridge 2 days ago, and there is a structure in place, everyone would be likely to know. A nice green metal bridge has been dropped on the supports. So as we were told at the leasing only a couple of weeks ago, they were ready to move, and they're moving quickly. So if they continue with that progress, I would say that we're on target to have a opening sometime next month. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed. But no, it looks pretty good so far. And yeah, I think the contractors are keeping pace with what they promised get the blessing. So keep our fingers crossed.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Curnow.
Councillor Worthy has just said exactly what I was going to say, right down to that I drove past it on Friday and there was the green bridge in place. So yeah, congratulations to the team and the contractors for really being ready to move by the time we got to the blessing. So it was very exciting to see that there. Thank you, team.
Great. Thank you. Are there further statements? Quick statement from me. This has been a project that's basically been green lighted at every stage of its development and since, and it's been the smoothest of all of our projects in these externally funded round of projects. So congratulations to the team and to Tim Manning with his project management on the ground of this work with the people from Bridget as well. It's really exciting to see this come through. So looking forward to a very busy February and March. Yeah, as this concludes for the Kaiwaka community. It's awesome. Thank you. Kia ora. Any further statements? No further statements. Thank you. Councillor Worthy, do you want a closing statement at all?
No, nothing further for me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll put this to the vote now on the noting of this report. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Unanimous vote there on that regarding the Kaiwaka footbridges. Again, thank you. Thank you. So moving on to the Mangawhai shared path and the noting of this report, Councillor Worthy moving this and Councillor Curnow seconding this again. Thank you. Rebecca.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report did generate a question that was sent through to me, and the question was, when did the works start that are impacting the 4 businesses before or after the first lockdown? And the answer was that it was around the start of July 2021. In other words, well before the first lockdown and about 6 weeks before the second lockdown. So hopefully that addresses the question that was posed prior to the meeting there. Otherwise, again, take the report as read and happy to take any questions.
So we've got Councillor Wilson-Collins and Councillor Worthy. I've got a question too. Thank you. And then Councillor Curnow. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, that was my question. Wasn't the original lockdown March 2020? So sorry, my question was when the works started. I didn't mean just the lockdowns in 2021. I meant like the original OG lockdown. That was in 2020, I believe. Is that correct? And the work started in July 2021. Is that what the answer is?
Through you, Your Worship, I might need to confer with my colleagues on this one because I'm not familiar with the background on these relate to the claims for business losses, I believe.
Yeah, so what I can confirm is that we do have an accountant that have contacted, and he said that once we've got accounts till the end of March, he feels it's a long enough period for them to be able to analyse and assess what the penalty might be to us, the cost might be to us.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Sue. Thanks, Rebecca, as well.
Thank you. Councillor Worthy, question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Rebecca, on the update from the previous month, part of your report, in the shared pathway on Molesworth Drive, statements made says second bullet point, road sealed for the entire length. Perhaps a more accurate statement might have been there's been a patch put over where it had been dug up. But have you got any confirmation that will get proper sealing? Because it's breaking up in several places right now and it's really quite rough. And I just I just know that there's going to be some aggro from the community if it continues to deteriorate the way it is, unless we have some proper sealing plan to take place over the next few months.
Through you, Your Worship, I will need to follow up and check on that, but you're quite right. I drive that route on my way into the office, and I did notice the same thing, so I'll follow up and find out what the plan is.
Thank you. And the only other question I had was relating, I know that we've always potentially been under pressure into the second phase of that project, and you're still having that as an area of risk. Have you got any update at this stage as to whether or not you've got a final figure of a budget for that second phase and what we potentially could be shortfalling the current approved funding?
Through you, Your Worship, we don't have that detail yet. I understand it is a work in progress, and I can look into that and report back to you unless Sue Davidson has any current information, but otherwise I will need to come back to you on that. I'm sorry.
I think we're still waiting confirmation of NZTA funding. That's the fly in the ointment at the moment for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. On the same subject, the this 2.66 million of the increase for the project cost identified on page 25 of our agenda in the open project risks. So the 2.66 million, which is the step up from 7.92 to 10.58. So Sue, just to be clear, so you're saying at this point that Waka Kotahi is supposed to come through with that money for us, or are you saying that the estimates have shifted and we're asking for Waka Kotahi for additional funds, and that if they come back, we're still going to have to find that somewhere else?
I think we're just waiting for Waka Kotahi at the moment. That's my understanding. And then when we find out what they are willing to what they will contribute and the cost of the design, we'll look at where there might be some pairbacks to see whether we can be within budget or not. Yeah, because I think that there's quite another path that's budgeted to go through at the moment through MAS, and we could look at shortening that. I mean, that might be one of the options. But at the moment, we're waiting for confirmation from NZTA.
All right, thank you. Councillor Curnow.
Just to comment on that last comment, as the chair of the governance committee for the Mangawhai Park, I would be concerned about that because we've done a lot of tree removal and left a lot of open ground on the basis that that path is coming through, and it'll just revert to wasteland if we don't actually do something there. So I'd be uncomfortable with that as being an option to cut it back, because we've kind of done half. We've broken the eggs, but we haven't made the omelette yet. So anyway, that would be a comment on that. The process, just going back to the businesses that are affected by the works, have they agreed? Is it in the contract that the process for assessing the compensation? I mean, obviously it's
Yes, they've agreed to the accountant basically coming up with an assessment. That's right. That's the process.
And then my final question is just the sealed path that goes down Molesworth Drive, or the shared path that goes down Molesworth Drive. That's getting sealed, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Right.
It will be sealed. That's right. We're just having conversations at the moment. You'll know that there's a large commercial area on the corner of Molesworth and Estuary Drive. So we're just looking at how many accesses are going to be, confirming, finalising that at the moment.
Okay, all right, that's why that's a bit slow. Okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification at this point? No further questions, thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Weddy for a statement here. Thank you.
No, I think there's been a general very, very favourable acknowledgement by the community of the benefit that the two roundabouts have brought to the village area right through the whole of the holiday season, when we were probably tripled our population in Mangawhai in total. I've never seen the traffic move so easily and consistently, and I think everyone's acknowledged that, in spite of the concerns that many groups raised during the extended consultation period. I think all those concerns were put to rest. So it's just really now out there, just a bit of tidy up being done right there at the moment, which is good to see. It shouldn't take more than another week or 10 days, I would think, to finalise that. The bit that was just touched on by Sue with respect to cementing or putting the concrete down for the shared path up along Molesworth Drive has been curbed. There is an extensive amount of pedestrian traffic walking up and down on the uneven surface that's left over there at present, awaiting the concrete laying. So I rather hope that does get on fairly soon, because it's not the easiest to walk on, and the sooner we get that done, the better. So, but overall, the project's going remarkably well, and United Civil are back on deck, and they've certainly won a lot of friends in the Mangawhai area with the work they've done before Christmas and now after Christmas. So well done for the project team. I think they're doing well, very good job.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Curnow, statement. The second half of your statement, please.
So the second half of my statement, yes, like I say, the community park, that project of the shared path going through there has kind of already started, so we need to be a little bit careful about what we do there, because I would really hate to see the quality of that facility being affected by this. We've already taken all the trees out, done some planting, and we need to do a lot more, and a lot of the areas where we haven't planted are about waiting for the shared path to go through. So I'd be really concerned if we were seriously looking at cutting that out. But overall on the project, yes, the contractors have done a wonderful job, and the project manager has also done a wonderful job of keeping it on track, and also being really agile to meet the needs of the community and the demands of operating through COVID lockdowns and different measures. So really want to pass that on to the contractors if possible. And the extent of how much the community are happy about this is, I was talking to somebody in the community yesterday, and he was talking about how he used to take them beers on a Friday. He'd take a crate of beer to the workers on a Friday because they were doing such a good job, which for Mangawhai is, yeah, for them to be doing that to a council project, it means that it's going well. So thank you, team.
They haven't brought any beers for the elected members yet, so they've
Oh, we don't deserve them.
Way ahead of us.
We don't deserve them.
Right, are there further statements from elected members on this? A quick statement from me. The feedback that I've received from the business people in the village area is one of real support for what's happened. They all acknowledge the period of pain and that they've been through, but that was for the greater good, because the situation that they have now is vastly superior to what it was before. And so the business people there, in their comments to me personally, have been ones of gratitude and happiness about the project having taken place, rather than going, oh, this was a huge mistake, wish it had never happened. So certainly acknowledging that there has been pain and trouble for some of those businesses, and I'm pleased that we have a process in place to be supporting them. I remember well the community meeting back, I'm going to say in July, in Mangawhai, just prior to the lockdown that occurred, where we were talking and council was hearing directly from those businesses that were affected at a meeting at the golf course, and we all heard that then, and there's still a process very much in view supporting those businesses now. So congratulations again to Tim Manning for his excellent project management here, and looking forward to this all being finished and to Waka Kotahi coming through with the rest of all of that money so to make this complete. Kia ora. Any further comments, elected members? Councillor Wethy, back to you for a statement to close if you wish.
For me. Thank you.
No, thank you. Right. So we're putting the noting of this item to the vote now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Unanimous again. Thank you. Moving on to the Unsealed Roading Network project, Vibeke. Oh, sorry, before you. So I'm happy to... Councillor Delavaris Woodcock is moving this item, and I'm happy to second this item. Thank you. Vibeke, over to you. Thank you. On mute.
Trap for young players, thank you. The only two things I wanted to note on with this report, other than that the schedule, budget and risks are all green, just a couple of corrections down on the bottom of page 33. The start of the comment that season 2 pavement works have now recommenced. They are in fact now complete. They had recommenced at the time that the report was originally prepared. And then over the page, on page 36, season 2 works under the project milestones. The status, baseline and expected completion dates are shown as December 2021. They should all be complete. But other than that, the program is going very well. And there is a certain amount of excitement about the new equipment. There's a photograph of that on page 37, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, Vibeke. The extraordinary amount of rain that we had in this last weekend right across most of Kaipara district, and there's more rain forecast, if you like, potentially shifts our unsealed road network from being a dry, drought, dusty environment to being what we'll call a normal autumn work environment. Is there any possibility that consideration would be made to bringing forward the season 3 works from May if we have what we call a wet autumn, which is of course that dryness, wetness is one of the factors here?
To date, the weather hasn't been raised with me as a concern, but I'm certainly happy to go back and check with the project manager and see what his evaluation of the situation is, and I'll report back.
Thank you. It's an opportunity possibly to be considered with our unsealed roads. Thank you. Councillor Delavaris Woodcock, question.
I have 3, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Vibeke, the page green or Araroa photo showing on page 39 shows completed work, and I was wondering, is that an example of the page green pavement innovation?
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that all of the work being done on the roads is consistent with the new technique or the methodology that was established through the Centre of Excellence.
Excellent. And on that topic, the ground penetrating radar data, how will this data on our unsealed network be used to improve the network going forward?
Through you, Your Worship, that is a technical question that is unfortunately beyond my level of expertise, but I will check with the project manager and report back.
Thank you. And I can see that from the graphs on page 46 about the water tabling, and can you describe about culvert clearing for the 84 kilometres that is completed and the 118 kilometres currently underway? Can you describe whether the culvert clearing is a parallel and tandem part of the unsealed improvement, or is it going to be a follow-up? Or can you just talk as much as you can about this aspect, please?
Through you, Your Worship, I can give a very non-technical preliminary response, but I think that I'll need to seek some further advice from you. But as I understand it, the issue is that the culverts fill up with metal, and these need to be cleaned out and then the road work done. But beyond that, I'm afraid I don't understand the specifics of how or the work is staged or anything like that.
Okay, that's it. Thank you for those answers.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? No further questions. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor De La Varas Woodcock, statement. Thank you.
Yes, so the 265 kilometres of the unsealed network improvement that will be completed by the funding that we have received for this is of great significance for our district. And I am aware of a fatality that has happened in our district caused by potholes. So once again, it's the most important part of our job as a district council is to provide and constantly improve the level of service on our roading network. I drew the project manager's attention to the issue of culverts and culvert clearance. And Vibeke, an interesting piece of information that may help you get to grips with the technical details that are important for this aspect of the project is that there are 3,000 culverts in the roading network in Kaipara. And once this externally funded project is completed, it is crucial that we have those 265 kilometres of roading network kept in good order, and it would be a grievous shame to see that service and pavement undone by blocked culverts. So I ask you to make the roading team, the Northland Transportation Alliance, and the various contractors and subcontractors that the whole of council and all of the residents and ratepayers of the district are really, really all in the same position about the culvert issue, culvert clearance, and if that could be attended to. I wish the weather works well for the work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Statement from me here is the photograph that's in the agenda of the Ararua Road, which is here, is on page 39 or page 7 of the report. If you see on the left side of the road, you can literally see how the new work is laid on top of the old foundation of the road. At the weekend just gone, I went for a 20-kilometre bike ride along Paparoa Station Road, which you'll also have all noted in the report has just been completed prior to Christmas. The roller, in fact, or within the last few weeks, the roller, in fact, is still sitting. Actually, I shouldn't have said that. Someone might go nick the roller. On the side of the road. Oh, that was at the weekend. The road surface looks as this photograph looks. And in my 50 years of life on these Kaipara roads, I've never seen anything like what I was riding a push bike on Paparoa Station Road. It's absolutely extraordinary. And so I just like, this is my first real experience, certainly getting up close on a push bike. So it was a real delight to me about how good the road surface is and how well it was standing up to the heavy rain that was happening as well. So I'd just like to commend the team for what's happening here and say I'm looking forward to all of our advantages that we can possibly get for our Unsealed road network coming through with this work. And I advocate everyone to get out there and have a look at this extraordinary work, and I'm really grateful that it's happening at all. Yeah, kia ora. Are there any further statements from elected members? No further statements. Councillor De La Varas Woodcock, would you like to make a closing statement?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So we'll put this to the vote now. The noting of this report. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. So we're moving on at this point to the Kaiwaka, the Kai irrigation project update. And so I'm seeking a mover for this item. Councillor Curnow, thank you. And a seconder for this item. Seeking a seconder for this item.
I'll second that.
Councillor Wethy, thank you. Vibeke.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Kaiwaka project is definitely being affected by the red status in respect of COVID. So that one of the key issues there is our project team and engagement team is working with the contractor Northland Inc. to find ways, excuse me, to find ways to demonstrate the sites, which is of course the part of the point of the project. We do hope to have that information within the next week. Otherwise, the planting has been completed, and I understand the plants are growing very well, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wethy, and then Councillor De La Varas Woodcock. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rebecca, you might be able to comment on this. We've got some nice pictures of some of the crops and how well they're doing. But of course, what we're interested in is the increased productivity of the irrigated sites compared to the placebo sites. Now, I've never really delved into this, but I've never seen it mentioned in any of our reports. But have we got sites that have been planted in an identical manner with identical crops, same level of fertilizer, but with no irrigation, so we can see whether they've got a similar or lesser volume of production from those that are irrigated? Because without those, how do we know that we've actually got a gain?
Through you, Your Worship, that's a good question, and if I can briefly reflect on my previous experience, certainly the point of the project in terms of the Provincial Growth Fund was to demonstrate really the value of water storage and to demonstrate crop crop diversification. I will need to get back to you on whether or not there are specific areas of each site that are non-irrigated. I know that came up during the early days of the sort of the project scoping, but I will need to check on that for you and come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De La Varas Woodcock.
Thank you. So my question is about Site 2, Manganui Bluff, and there's a photo in the report which shows the corn having been planted. And I was just wondering about the irrigation of that site. Has there been any? Because I understand it wasn't aerial. It's not the same. It's a drip feed irrigation. I understood it was meant to be, and I can't see any signs in the image.
Through you, Your Worship, just to clarify, are you asking if Site 2 is irrigated?
Yes, and how? What you know, in the photo, I cannot see it. Has it been at all irrigated?
Yes, it has. I'll need to double check on what mechanisms they've used, but certainly the project was for both sites was to use irrigated water.
So from the image, I cannot see any infrastructure or hardware, any pipes or irrigators, but of course there may be. Could you just perhaps, I'm thinking that it might have been a water cart, and could you confirm that, please?
Through you, Your Worship, certainly, yes, I'll check and report back to you on that.
Okay, and I have two more questions. Has the Te Kōpuru irrigator ever been in action or used?
Again, through you, Your Worship, I'll need to check on that detail and get back to you.
And then the final question is, the report shows that February 22, this month, we will see the watermelon being harvested, and I'm wondering, has that been done, or is there any update about that imminent harvest that you know of?
Through you, Your Worship, I know that there was some recent discussion about securing labour for harvest, so I assume the answer to that is yes, but again, I'll check on the details and get back to you.
Thank you. And one final question I do have is about the records of the inputs used for the crops, and who or which party is it, the community or Northland Inc., or the project manager that's doing the data record for all of that detail, which will be crucial to use going forward.
Through you, Your Worship, certainly part of the project is about documenting learnings, so that is certainly a good point, and again, I'll just need to double check on the details of that.
Thank you, Vibeke. I've given you a few.
That's fine. That's
up.
fine. I'm sorry, I'm not immediately in a position to answer some of the more detailed questions.
You're doing great. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Curnow, then Councillor Vincent. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Vibeke. I'm just wondering if you have any update on regarding the wet conditions that we're having now, and whether those are affecting the project in any way, because obviously the project was supposed to show the benefit of irrigation, but currently we're not needing much in the way of irrigation. Do you have any update on that?
Through you, Your Worship, no, I'm sorry, I don't at this stage. Certainly nothing has been raised as a risk with me at this point.
That's good. And just a quick second question. We've been sort of looking at a second round of planting. Do you know if that's in hand and where we're at with that? Because obviously if the watermelon starts coming out soon, and then we're into March, we need to move quickly if we're going to do those second plantings. Do you know if we're doing that?
Through you, Your Worship, I am aware that is in discussion. I don't know what the timeframes are for that just yet, but I do know that there has been some conversations about crop selection for that second season if it goes ahead.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just have a clarification on that point? So what we're talking about here is the second planting in the first season, not a second season. Rebecca, yes. So what we're talking about here is plants being put in the ground in February, March, and being irrigated for harvest in May, which is traditionally the time of year where kaipara would be able to grow crops, but it cannot get them started. And that's where the water comes in. So is that what you're speaking to, or are you speaking to next spring?
That's a good question, and I'm afraid I don't know the answer. The phrase that has been used in the conversations that I've been part of, I don't know the answers have been referenced second season, but that is a point of clarification that I'll need to check. Okay. In other words, I don't know the answer at the moment.
Okay, thank you. One of the I would say this committee has been constantly reminding everyone about that original intent of this Kai water project was not about growing crops between November and January. We don't need water for that. It's actually for a later period. So that was the purpose in the project. So anyway, I'll save my statement for later. Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to add to Councillor Welly's queries too regarding being able to make a comparison between a sort of status quo and the irrigated version. I would wonder if the question could also include whether not just the yield impacts, but also the marketing impacts in terms of whether it would be possible to get a crop to market that much sooner and get an advantage, and B, be more available to get that second crop in by having got the first one in and through and done that much quicker. So that's part of the package, I think, in terms of understanding the benefits totally of this irrigation. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
That's something that I don't expect our staff member to be able to answer right on the spot, but if she's making inquiries about Councillor Welly's question, well then that could be added to it to amplify it perhaps.
Through you, Your Worship, just as a comment, and again, just from my previous exposure to this contract, from the other side of the table, the scope of the project was really around the benefits of water irrigation and demonstrating crop diversity. So if marketability has entered the fold, my understanding would be that would be an additional scope to the project.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification here? No further questions. Thank you. So at this point, we've got Deputy Mayor Curnow moved this. Thank you.
Yeah, just I'm imagining things are going very well up on both sites at the moment with even if we didn't have irrigation, everything's growing like crazy right now, the warm wet weather. But yeah, I do emphasize that that we have talked all the way along about that second planting in this season. So yeah, it would be disappointing if for some reason we weren't ready for that. So yeah, I encourage officers to look into that and keep the pressure on that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Withy.
No, nothing further to add. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll just wait till I get the answers to my question. That'll be all.
Thank you. Thank you. A statement from me, very keen for this project to actually add value to our horticulture industry locally. The Taitokara Water Storage Trust is building new irrigation as well in the area. And so this is part of potentially creating future industries and pathways for learning. Again, right now, I'm aware that the COVID has very much distorted the spring and the spring growing season for these projects. It removed all of the community engagement events for this project, which is a shame. And we see here in the project plan that they're scheduled for later in February. And I'm hopeful that the COVID won't wreck all that again, and that we will in fact be able to have open days and communication about what is going on with this very, very leading edge project. One of the comments from the community has been often that Kaipara District Council doesn't do anything for the future and never talks about the future. This project is absolutely focused for the future, with a minimal water use project, which is intended to be able to be applied in Mangawhai, as well as all across the district. And then, of course, the big irrigator for where there are larger water supplies. I'm really keen that everyone is still aware that this work is going on and that the comms and events programs continue to roll, and that the feedback that we continue to get about doing something valuable and interesting regarding a crop rather than something that actually people are just already growing down the road, doing it at the same time of year and not really making a difference, but instead that we're doing something that is going to make a potential difference into the future for the next generation of Kaiparetians. That's part of what this project is about. So I'm very, very keen to hear more about this. I'm also very keen to know what Northland Inc. is going to do next after this trial. So it's going to be very exciting for year 2, which will technically be year 3 of the project because year 1 didn't happen, but year 2 of this and where we go next for growing the kai and kaipara. Kia ora, Councillor De La Varis Woodcock, statement.
Yes, this project has been beset by challenges, and not least of them being COVID, as the other elected members have touched upon. My contribution to this discussion, I'm going to, instead of focusing on all the glitches, I'm going to take a positive view, because from the images we see community, we see learning by doing, we see really fascinating at Manganui Bluff, we see flats being used for kai, for food, in what probably has been pasture for too long or for a very long time. So I will make a statement that discussion of a food growing irrigation project among elected members is somewhat outside of our comfort zone, because we are used to dealing with the business of roads and 3 waters and libraries and parks, but not project management of innovative horticulture and growing methods. So I just want to say that it's begging to continue, and I put it out there that it should, and I guess we have Northland Inc., and that's who I'm directing this message to, is that you learn, as I know from my own experience with growing food and that of my husband, that every season teaches you something, and especially with new varieties and new crops, you are going to have to continue to plant in order to learn what the obstacles are in order to get a good product. So I look forward to the next update on this this project. Thank you.
Kia ora. Are there any further statements? No further statements. We'll go back to Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow for a closing statement if you so wish.
Nothing further to add. I think it's all been said.
Okay, thank you. We'll put this to the vote now then. All those in favour of noting this report, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Right, moving on. Sorry, just before we do, so Vibeke, regarding that project is with Northland Inc. So there's a lot of feedback there for Northland Inc. It may be because today's meeting is being recorded, you may want to direct Northland Inc. to this section of today's meeting, just for them to, the appropriate people to watch that and hear directly what the feedback is. Thank you. But yeah, it's up to you. Okay, we're moving on to the next item here, which is Poto Road Phase 1 update on this. So I'm happy to move the noting of this report, and I'm seeking a seconder for the noting of this report. Councillor Joyce Paki, thank you. Actually, yeah, thank you. So, Vibeke, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The status report is as it is, and I don't have a further comment on that. However, you will note that there is a subsequent item regarding the funding of Poto Road Phase 1, and Greg Monteith from NTA is joining us and is here now. So I'm just suggesting that if perhaps there are any technical questions on the update report, that perhaps he be invited to participate in discussing those, particularly if there are questions that I'm unable to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So, elected members, are there questions for clarification? Councillor Wills, this is, if we can try to stick to this report and then noting that there's a second report as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, and because I can't find my details, we approved an original budget, and as normal, we approved an additional, what do you call it, additional funds that would be needed, to be used if needed. And in your report, it says that they need an additional 400,000 on top of that. Have you got the records there to how much was actually provided that was supposed to be the buffer that was used without our knowledge at the time, please? Sorry, what was the amount of the contingency funds that were applied to that project that were used without us being made aware of it at the time?
I can answer that through your worship. And I suppose this does feed on to the next paper, and I suppose they're both interlinked. The breakup or the breakdown of the costs for the project, obviously we had an approved contract value of $3.9 million for the contract. We had $1 million of heavy metaling that we used as business as usual through the heavy metaling portion of the works, and then we had the remainder of the budgets going towards design. We put an extra 500,000 in for second coat seal, which is in year 2 of the LTP. The resulting fact, I suppose, is, and I suppose I would talk to this in the next paper, is the contingency was very, very small in this project, less than 1%. I think we had to play around with in the contingency for any unforeseen errors. The reality is, I suppose, when we led this project, we put it out to tender. We had tenders between 5.5 million and 11 million is what we got from the market. So then when we, obviously above our budget of 5 million from PGF, so we had to negotiate with the lowest tender. We did that, refined the design, we brought the design down to within budget, and I think that worked out at 4.5 million, and 1 million of that was under heavy metalling, under business as usual from KDC. So we got approval from KDC and NZTA to use those funds to undertake work prior to the contract through the maintenance contract. And then that left us money as well then to be undertaking the Green Hill Quarry and producing material there, because that was cheaper, and to undertake the designs. So we literally had very little room for contingency in this project, non-existent.
Thank you. I'll keep the questions, actually, the technical questions for the next paper.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wethy, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Greg, you touched on Green Hill Quarry. I can vividly recall the business case that was put forward at the time to council to grant it the $1 million required to open up that quarry and provide the heavy metal for the work that you've just described.
Yes.
So there's already been, and bearing in mind, you said, and quite rightly so, that it was business as usual. That money came from business as usual budgets. Now, effectively, that was subsidising this particular project. So even though it got that subsidy through that business as usual capital grant for the opening of the Green Hill Quarry, you've still used up any contingency and are now looking as though we're going to blow out even further at this stage. Is that correct?
That's correct. I suppose it's taking it back to the fundamental of the original project and the costs being very tight from the word go. So from our original scope of what we were asked to do and the budget we received from PGF, and the costs that we got in, so having an original budget of 5 million from PGF, and having a range of tenders in just for the physical work, so between 5.5 and 11 million, it gives an idea of what we were trying to do as a project team to try and make it work. And one of the ones was to bring the cost down was the Green Hill Quarry. So there was $1 million, which was a project cost. That wasn't business as usual. The business as usual was the heavy metalling portion of the works. The $1 million for the Green Hill Quarry was in fact in the project scope and the cost of that. So when we had the $5 million from MB, the $1 million from business as usual, and then the 500,000 from year 2 of the LTP for the second coat seal, which the project never allowed for. That was our starting point, and at that starting point, I suppose that left us very little room for any unforeseens or any contingencies, any mistakes. But we needed to do that to actually progress the project, because if we hadn't, then we wouldn't have been in a position to be able to deliver the project as it stood, and in terms of meeting the requirements of MB for the budget that we had.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification at this point? Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, question. Thank you, Greg, for turning on your camera.
Sorry. Yeah.
Tēnā koe, Greg.
Kia ora.
Forgive me if I lapse into the next item, but
we'll please try to stay. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock will try to stay with the item, because we have the next item is the next item.
Yes. I pick up from this discussion on this item to clarify about the heavy metalling component of $1 million as business as usual. That amount, business as usual, heavy metalling $1 million, would that have been used for the whole of the Unsealed network ordinarily without this project?
That would have been spread over part of the whole of the network. So that was coming from our the fund for the whole network. What we did have, and I suppose it helped somewhat, that we did have in our long-term plan money to be doing Poacher Road and heavy metalling before we got the approval. So part of that $1 million, I think originally some of it was possibly already earmarked for Poacher Road, to be doing works on Poacher Road as business as usual prior to receiving the approval from MB to seal the road. So that would have happened in the previous LTP and been in that 3-year period. So there would have been a portion of that fund that would have been already allocated to Poacher Road, but then the rest of it would have been allocated throughout the rest of the network.
Thank you for that. Greg, do you know what the portion might have been? That's already allocated for Poacher Road?
I don't. I'd have to double check just to see what that was. Or how much was allocated for that in the long-term plan and the programs.
That's sort of important for the next item because it has bearing.
Thank you. So are there further questions for this item now? No further questions? Okay, all right, thank you. Noting that we've got the next item coming up. Yep, thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Vibeke. You may stand down for a moment here. Statements here. Look, this is disappointing and concerning about the budget blowout that is emerged for this project, Poto Road Phase 1, and the additional $480,000 which is being sought here. So that's what we see in this report. There's a subsequent item. We're going to be discussing that in more detail, but just regarding noting the project, this is concerning and not a happy moment as far as I'm concerned at all. Yeah, so but I am also mindful that we are near the end of this project and the end as well. So the end is in sight. So well done to the team with the progress that's been made so far. And so I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you. Councillor Joyce Paki as the seconder. Kia ora, over to you.
Yeah, I'd concur with your thoughts there, Mr. Mayor. I know the feedback from the community of Poto has been really positive, so that's a plus. But from where we're sitting looking at the budget, that's definitely is, you know, in a worse state than the road was. So, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you. So, elected members, are there further statements at this point? Councillor Wills.
My statement is we constantly have these project blowouts, but no one seems to be held accountable or responsible. All we see is a request for more money. At what point do we become businesslike and actually ask for heads? That's my statement.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Weddy, statement.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I guess this is really just a statement on the way in which the report's put together. And going back to Councillor Wills originally, his original question about what was the makeup of the funding for this project, including the allocation of benefits from opening up the Green Hill Quarry, etc., etc. It would have been nice to have a separate reconciliation of the funding breakdown and each component of expenditure to match against that, so we could see exactly where we were coming under pressure and blowing out to any overruns. At this stage here, it's a bit too broad brush to really understand what the real significance is. And I think that's a lesson that staff should take note of, because it's, in my experience, it's a bit like the old mushroom theory that staff used to feed into governance levels, and I think that that's not something that's going to be tolerated here.
Okay, thank you. Are there further statements? Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to actually acknowledge the extraordinary times and that we're dealing with, and the fact that we're trying to complete projects that started before I was even, and some of the other councillors were even on council, that money was applied for and granted. Things have changed extraordinarily since then. Costs have gone up everywhere. People haven't been available for contracts, which makes the costs go up even more. Equipment hasn't been available. And I just want to put some perspective on the climate that we're dealing with, and that it's not just basic budget blowouts. It's a time where we have got costs forever rising. That's not going to stop. I think elected members should be very realistic that this is what we're going to be dealing with for the next probably 12 or 24 months, or maybe even longer, with everything that we have planned to do. That the reality is going to be quite different to what's down on a piece of paper. And I would like to commend the staff who have to deal with these extraordinary situations and still try and get everything across the line. It's a lot of pressure for them. And I really feel for the work that they're trying to do and the constraints that they're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. Further statements from elected members? No further statements. Right, thank you. So we'll put the noting of this Poto Road Phase 1 report to the vote now. So all those in favour of noting this report, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, we've been going for an hour and a half. I think we should take a 5-minute break and resume at 25 to 3. So that'll be 12:35 p.m. Thank you. And we'll just take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Ka kite.
We're not live yet, are we, Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry.
Yes, we are live right through. The meeting is recorded and live, even when we are having a break. So we don't yet have a quorum, so we now have a quorum, so we'll pick up from where we left off. So we're at the next one of our agenda items, which is page 69 of the agenda. Poto Road Stage 1 additional funding is our item here, and there is a recommendation here that the committee recommends to council the shortfall of 487,000 be funded from retained earnings to facilitate the completion of Poto Road Phase 1 sealing project, and recommends the increase of the works contract 960 by that appropriate amount to $3,911,983.18. I'm happy to move this as it is written, and I've got a seconder there who's Councillor Curnow. That puts it onto the table. Thank you at this point. And so we now, Greg, if you could.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, your camera's there. Thank you. So there will be many questions here, Greg.
Yeah.
And also, I expect, Sue, there will be questions also for you as well. So, Greg.
With that, I suppose the usual thing of saying the report is read, I'll maybe try and do a more in-depth introduction and take through and then take questions, if that's okay with the committee. Okay, as your worship pointed out, the paper here is to seek additional funding to complete Poto Phase 1. I just want to highlight an error in the agenda before we go on under the executive summary. There's a second sentence. It states that the approval to use the existing MO&R funds. That's just an error and that sort of made its way through into the report that shouldn't have. So just to highlight that. And just to confirm that we are seeking approval to fund the overspend through retained earnings, as in the recommendation. Just to go over the context, as you're aware, KDC was awarded $5 million to undertake the sealing of 10 kilometres of Poto Road. We received the tenders varying in price from between $5.5 and $11 million. We then had to take those prices, work with the lowest tender to try and reduce that cost to make the project viable. And I suppose they worked with the tender, the team, the design consultants, refined the design, looked at options, and were able to bring that price down. And I believe that came down from about 5.5 down to 4 point something million dollars. So there was a considerable amount of work that went done in the upfront to value engineer this project to try and make it feasible, because the original prices we got back, it wasn't feasible on the budget that we had. So with that, we also had to, and as you're aware, we seek additional funding and where those options could be. And the option that we settled on and approved on was utilising an additional $1 million of BAU heavy metalling, and that was approved through council and NZTA before the project was awarded. And in doing this, that left us very little scope for any contingency or any unforeseen errors in the project. So literally, we cut everything back. We had no contingency, all in an attempt to make sure the project did proceed, was the logic with that, because there wasn't really many more avenues with funding options to proceed. So unfortunately, we did run into several issues and have forecasted an overspend of 487,000. These are all listed in the report. Some of them are minor, some of them are significant. I'll touch on, I suppose, some of the more major ones and provide a bit more detail of that. Item 1, we had the increase in earthworks and imported fill material, equating to 200,000, which is our biggest item. There's 4 reasons for that, predominantly. The survey not matching what was found on site at the time of construction, resulting in additional imported fill. and that's, we believe down to is just the timing of when the survey was done and when we actually got to site, with delays of the project going forward. So, and the material then sort of being reduced on the road. We had significantly more unsuitable material than expected, resulting in more earthworks and increased imported fill material being required. We had unsuitable material when cutting banks and resulting in further earthworks. So when the guys were trying to cut some of the banks for visibility, there was a lot of those banks that just frittered away and required a lot more earthworks than what we anticipated. And we had a number of soft spots which we had to dig out then, obviously, and backfill with imported material and geogrid. So that was the crux of our biggest item. We also had cost fluctuations, item 3. This relates predominantly to the timing of the works. We tendered the works and received the tenders in September 2020. And obviously the costs come in, so we had to do a number of negotiations with the tender and work through that, and then come back to council and with NZTA. So we got to a point then of negotiating and awarding the contract in November. Following the award of the contract, we were still waiting on our earthworks consent. So we weren't able to start the works until the 29th of March because we didn't have the earthworks consent. And the delay in the earthworks consent, there's a few reasons in there, but the predominant one is the cultural impact survey that we needed as part of the earthworks consent. And I suppose that was then had to be done through environs. And at that time, there was a significant number of projects going on and a significant amount of pressure on resources for cultural impact assessments and getting things done with the wharfs and different projects and other projects even outside of KDC, I understand. So there was quite a delay in getting that signed off and allowing us to actually physically start the works. So that put us in a position then of being 5 months behind actually starting the works when the tender was let. So then the contractor was then entitled in the contract for cost fluctuations. So we negotiated with that and obviously had to work through with them to what that would look like and what the cost fluctuations were and what the increases are in that time. And obviously we had an engineer's decision, so that gave us an increase there. I think it was 70,000. Just looking at the report. Yeah, 70,000. We had a increase in MSQA costs, which is quite significant, and that was item 7. The reason we had a significant increase, and I suppose this leads back to utilizing every single option we had to try and make this project get across the line at the start, and working with the previous GM to utilize internal resources within KDC to be the engineer's rep and be down who was localized to that area and was able then to work in that area and supervise the works to a portion in conjunction with the consultants. Unfortunately, again, that individual got overloaded and with other projects coming on and the amount of work that had to be done through various PGF projects, they weren't able to provide that resource in that time. And then in addition to that, that person then left KDC and moved on. So we lost that person, we lost the expertise with that person, and hence then we had to rely a lot more on bringing in consultants to do the work that we thought we could utilize internal resources for. And our other main item was item 8, the cultural monitoring fees. And this goes back then to, and I suppose all these items are somewhat interlinked. We had delays in starting the work, obviously, as I just talked to. So in doing that, that's resulted in the work's being pushed out and a lot more work then occurring during the winter months, which took a lot longer to actually undertake those earthworks and get that completed. That resulted then in obviously additional monitoring costs and people being on site to monitor them from a cultural aspect. We had a number of discoveries of middens and bones on site, which resulted in obviously then us having to go through the process, the accidental discovery process, and halting works and having the appropriate people on site and investigated by the archaeologists to make sure we could then proceed and treat those with the way they needed to be done. And obviously then we had obviously additional monitoring based on item 1, which was the additional earthworks, which, yeah, as we talked about with the unsuitable material. So there was additional monitoring required for that. The other items, I suppose, are listed there. I won't talk to them in detail, but it's there is some items in there that that do add on to it as well. So we have put together 3 options, and I won't run through all the options. Only to note, obviously, we have talked with NZTA about utilising existing budget. Well, initially asking for additional funds if there was possible, and that was declined. And obviously, then what options were available to us if funding wasn't available, and they were reluctantly okay to approve using the MONR, but not acknowledging then obviously that that's existing budgets, there is no additional money, and that has to be maintained or managed within the existing budget. The third option there we've put down is obviously we stop the works, and if when you can't build what we can afford. And I just wanted to, I suppose there was a question raised before just about the what the costs might be relating to option 3 in terms of MB and the contractual agreement. We generally don't know what that is yet, what that is, but we do know obviously we were contracted to deliver 9.8 Ks or 10 Ks of seal through our contract. So obviously we'd have to have that discussion with MB of what that looks like, and I wouldn't expect they'd be asking for all the money back, but at worst I would have thought that there could be some sort of pro rata discussion going on if we haven't delivered that. And we certainly have talked with MB in terms of utilising and getting extra funds, or utilising funds from other projects that aren't being used, and those requests were certainly declined. So it's just maybe trying to sum all that up. It's put it into perspective of we were certainly trying everything from the start of this project to make it feasible and to get it to work, and the project team and everyone involved in it was certainly pushed to try and make it work and get it across the line, and this is how we did, and in doing so we didn't have much of a contingency on that, and I suppose for a project of this magnitude, when you're talking no contingency of a several $1 million project, which normally in all rights you would have a contingency of 5 to 10%. In this we'd less than 1% that we had to play with for any unforeseen errors or anything coming into it, and we did have a number of them that came into this. So we certainly didn't have any room for these errors to come through, and obviously we didn't want them to, but we are where we are now, and I suppose it's trying to be open and transparent of why we've landed where we are, and what our options are, and put that on the table and have a discussion with council.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing this and for your explanation of how we get to the moment that we've got to. This is a very serious moment. Councillor Curnow, I see you have a question. I have a what I call the first idiot's question of the day. Is from me to Sue. And could you please explain, Sue, about the retained earnings and the statement in this report about there being 700,000 of retained earnings from last year that were due to underspending in the general rates categories, and that is, if you like, what we're proposing with the recommendation here to use, and what, if any, future impacts that would have on the rates for next year, if you like. Is that money that we would be taking already earmarked for something else in the proposed annual plan? So if you could just give an explanation around the retained earnings, but how we arrive at that, and then how that money was already going to be being earmarked for use, or whether it was just floating money.
Yeah, okay, through your worship. So at the end of last year, we made $1 million over our the budgeted surplus that we were intending to make. And we did that because there was some money, well, to explain, there was 300,000 of that related to targeted areas. So we can't touch that because we can't touch those into the pot for either water, waste or stormwater, I think, on my understanding. So, but there was 700,000 that was relating to general rates, funded items, and they might have been things. They were things like the biggest item was roading. I think there was 300,000 we didn't spend from roading last year. There was 100,000 extra profit we made on resource and building consents. There was money we didn't spend in stationery, money we didn't spend in staff travel, staff use of vehicles. So that at the end of the year just went back into our bank account. It wasn't targeted for anything. And so that's why I've suggested that we could use that funds as an alternative to cutting our roading program. Does that explain
Thank you.
it?
Thank you. That's an excellent answer on the first part of my question. Regarding the second part of the question was those retained earnings that you've explained clearly there, were they already earmarked for something else in the annual plan?
No, they weren't. We haven't earmarked, council hasn't earmarked anything for those at the moment. And there is still some funding left, as I say. There's still 700,000. If we use 487, there's still $250,000 left from retained earnings that we could use if we wanted to. But council hasn't earmarked anything yet.
Okay, thank you. That is clear. So I'll go to Councillor Curnow, then Councillor Weddy, then Councillor Vincent to start us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm just going to drill in just a little bit more, just again in the spirit of the idiot questions that just give me absolute confidence. So if we were to approve this $500,000 to go from retained earnings into this project, there would be no impact on the planned rate rise that we're looking at in our annual plan.
No, there's not.
Okay. All right. Okay, that gives me a degree of comfort. So the MB decision or response that they didn't want to allow us to use the surplus from the design, the phase 2 design project. Did they give a reason why they wouldn't do that?
Not a specific reason. They just didn't want the money being allocated to separate projects. They felt, I suppose, the contract was for this project that it's set out in the agreement, and that was the value, and they weren't prepared to move that across, unfortunately, and that was as clear as we got.
It is unfortunate. Yeah, and was there any, I mean, obviously if it's not going to make a difference on our annual plan going forward, then I'm less concerned about this, but I'm just wondering whether there was any thought to funding this partly from the heavy metaling or fund and partly from retained earnings. Would there be any benefit from looking at that kind of more or a bit more sort of split funding?
It's certainly an option, I suppose. What you could slice these up into various different scenarios, sort of thing. But I suppose it was trying to keep it simple, and I suppose from a level of service, I suppose that deemed to be that we're not touching what we had agreed to do in terms of the long-term plan, and not affecting that level of service. Because if we do, then obviously there's an impact on that. Obviously it'll be reduced if we do split it, but it's still an impact, and I suppose that's part of the conversation today, and that certainly can be an outcome, but it's just to acknowledge and accept that there will be, if it was split 50-50, that there will still be a number of kilometres of heavy metaling that wouldn't occur.
Yeah, Yep. No, I don't disagree with the recommendation that you're making. I was just wondering whether there'd been any sort of consideration on that. No, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Withy, then Councillor Vincent, then Councillor De La Varas Woodcock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two things, or several issues. Firstly, going back to Sue, you talk about retained earnings and that we've got money and this been not targeted. We've also been flagged that the fit out costs for the new office in Dargaville are substantially more than was originally vested. This is surely another alternative use of those retained earnings.
It depends on how they're funded. So this
That's
was
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So these were yes, but some things are funded by loan, so you might extend the loan, which doesn't have as much detriment. Like roading is funded completely 100% from rates. So, and I'm unsure as to how the civic buildings, how that, and I think that was in last year that we were made aware of that.
Well, so moving on, that of the money from retained rates that you've mentioned, there is only about 300,000 that you're talking about that came out of the roading budget, though.
Yes.
That was okay. That's fine. That's only part. Now, the point of clarification I'd like to ask in the recommendation. Firstly, in A, you're talking about the shortfall of 487,000 being funded for retained earnings, and then the next one you're talking about increasing the contract, the seal extension, by 315. So what's the difference? Where's the additional $175,000? Where does that come from?
The difference being, I suppose, part of the increase is physical works. Part of it is MSQA, which isn't through the contract. It's a project cost, but it's not a contractual cost. So I suppose those are two separate recommendations of a complete increase in overall project cost of 487,000. The physical work portion and the contract portion is only 315,000. We've got then obviously the monitoring costs that don't come out of the contract value. We've got MSQA with the consultants that don't come out of the cost there. So this is just the portion of that will go through the contract that we would have to increase the contract value by to finish the works to be able to pay the contractor.
Okay, so it would have been a bit clearer if you'd said that B was included in A, if you like, because we're not looking at any. So now the other thing is too, and this is just a query as to this elected member group was made painfully aware of the lack of contingency for the Waipua Forest Road, and that contract was delayed for many months until we managed to get the contingency elevated to the stage that we as councillors were comfortable with that. This here seems to be a classic case of not enough contingency. So why, if we went with such an extended discussion and consideration of one project for its contingency or lack of until we got it to an acceptable level, why didn't we do the same here? Because what you described in that very lengthy explanation, to my mind, was just the day of reckoning coming when you suddenly realised that you were well short of the acceptable 10% minimum contingency that you should have had in this project in the first place. This is really the first time we've had the nuts and bolts on the table in front of us, and I'm saying this is a late stage in the whole project for us to be made painfully aware of this position.
Yeah, I do acknowledge that. And I would have to go back. I suppose I'm not privy to maybe all the conversations that happened prior with the previous GM on that. But I do acknowledge it was very tight from the word go, and more conversations and more transparency should have been forthcoming if it wasn't. But that's all I can put on the table for that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor De La Varas Woodcock. And then I have a question for Vibeke as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question might be just to Sue and then on to Greg, I think. So firstly, of that $300,000 that wasn't spent that's still sitting in what you called retained earnings, was that as a result of work being completed under budget, or was it as a result of work not being done?
That was work that was under budget, not spent because of the lockdowns. I don't know about the roading. That was just unspent.
So are you saying then that was unspent, meaning that the work wasn't done?
Well, travel. No, staff weren't able to travel.
No, there was
$300,000
in the roading budget.
Probably wasn't spent because, you know, a budget's a budget and they've got a $16 million budget. So to be 300,000 that's unspent over the number of categories that roading's got is quite acceptable.
Yes, so does that, so I would take it then that you're saying that the work was done and it cost $300,000 less to get it completed in a $16,000 budget.
Yes, I mean, it's their operating budget. So it's basically what they're doing each month. And they've obviously got a set of tasks to complete, and they managed to complete them despite COVID.
Right. So what you're saying is
within budget.
That was a saving on actually completing the task. So that's really cool. So then I'm trying to look on the bright side in this.
Yep.
And so that's one little shiny light. So that's cool. Thank you. So what I'm seeing here is that we've got a project that the total actual cost is something over $700,000 a kilometre. Now, I can recall not too long ago it was about $250,000 a kilometre. So how does that rate compared with an average cost per kilometre of road sealing, should we do any, across the district?
I'll ask Greg to answer that.
That'd be a great question.
The rates do vary considerably depending where you are and access the material. And obviously Pocho Road being quite isolated with that and bringing in bitumen and plant across that, it has increased the costs of working remotely there. So if it was somewhere close to the centre of, I don't know, Whangarei, say, where it's closer to the plant and the bitumen plant, it certainly would be a lot less. And costs certainly do vary, and when we look at sealing of just the environment, where power poles are, how close they are to the road, what infrastructure needs moved. So there certainly is variable to it.
I'm with you all there, Greg. It's just I wanted to get an idea of, like, pluck out of the sky a number that you would work on. Say an average cost for a kilo. I know this was going to be always going to be a more expensive than average. But what is the average these days?
We're sort of looking in average about 500 plus thousand a kilometre.
Yep. So we've got that figure. Then of that, what is the amount or even percentage, the amount in dollar terms of council ratepayers' money that's gone into this per kilometre or even the total project? Per kilometre, if we could, please.
Per kilometre, well, I suppose if we're taking the full project costs, we had, sorry, just see if I can find some notes. So at the moment, we had the 5.5 million or 5 million from NB. We had second coat seal is 500,000, which council has put in, which is in year 2 of the LTP. Which we haven't used yet.
Is that all ratepayer funded, that 500,000?
That will be 500,000. And then the $1 million, I think about 300,000 of that was, just over 300,000 was KDC's share of the heavy metaling. So 800,000 would be KDC's share at the moment.
Yep.
That way, excluding any decision on the 487.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, chuck that 480,000 in there as well. That's going to be all local share money. So you're talking about
pending today's decision. If you decide on retained earnings, yes. If you decide on MO&R budgets, then that 487, a third of it would be council share. So 150,000 of that, is it 185 would be.
Yep. So the unspent share of the roading budget, the $300,000, then, as Sue was explaining to me, that is not all ratepayer share. That includes the subsidised share. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't collect the 300,000 is not, it's just our share.
Okay, but I guess where I'm wanting to get to is how much is it going to cost us as council to have 10 kilometres of sealed road, given the various external inputs from Provincial Growth Fund and our normal NZTA financial assistance rate and stuff. I'm interested to know.
It could vary between, pending today's decision, I suppose, between 1.3 million if we fund it totally from retained earnings, or maybe 900 to a million on using MONR budgets. Yeah,
I'm interested in a round number, so I'll just say $1 million. In other words, we're getting a sealed road for $100,000 a kilometre, roughly speaking. That's correct. I mean, to me, that's a pretty good investment. Okay, so I'll take that as a positive. Then the next thing is I'm wanting to know, and this would be a general observation, I imagine, with the road being sealed, does that mean that the ongoing maintenance costs would be greater or less than if it remained unsealed?
Long term, it's usually greater. You will notice in the first couple of years, the maintenance, you won't need to do anything, but when you do have to do maintenance, it's substantially more. And I think there's various calculations out there of what they talk about, but possibly 3 to 4 times more expensive to maintain an unsealed road. But the estimates vary of which district you're in and where it is, sort of thing. But it is generally more expensive to maintain a sealed road.
Right. So that wasn't the answer I was looking for, but however, we'll have to go with that. The other thing I was looking for a plus to come out of this exercise is like the Greenhill Quarry was opened up especially for this job. Will there be any ongoing benefits from having that quarry having been opened up in terms of serving other, like supplying metal? I'm not too sure if it would be suitable for maintenance metal in other parts of the district in the vicinity. No, I think it's there was an agreement as well, which I'd have to go back and check with the local hapu iwi, about once we'd done the works, closing that quarry down again and then reinstating it back to some sort of natural environment, and what that may look like. I'm not sure, and Jim was a part of that conversation, but it was to close it down again and get some sort of reinstatement of some sort of previous life back to it. Oh, well, once again, that wasn't the answer quite I was hoping to hear, but that's how it is. That's how it is. I think I've used up my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, then Councillor Wills. Thank you.
Yes. So my first question's for so the retained earnings, $1 million over the surplus budget, is that for the 2020 year to the 2021 year?
Yeah, that's my understanding that it is. I think we planned a surplus of 9.6 million, and the surplus was 10.6 million.
So given that we've had similar circumstances of lockdowns and staff not spend, expenditure should be less on fuel, transportation for staff and stationery and the other items you listed. So would there be a forecasted similar retained earnings surplus in the budget for the 2021 to 22 June financial year coming up soon?
There does look like there are some in some categories, and you'd see that when the financials come through, that we're well ahead of budget for the surplus. Yes.
So
but obviously there's been extra costs on our projects. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at a forecast surplus again. So this is important to my decision and the way I vote for this item. So even though so my question is, why are we forecasting a 7.59% rates increase when we had $1 million surplus over budget retained earnings? And
Because
also, wait a minute, sorry, what percentage of $1 million is the rates?
So the first question is, why didn't we pass? Because our Treasury policy says that it basically goes back into the bank or pays the general portion of the Mangawhai debt, which is what it has done. That's been paid down. So unless, and what I'm doing is what Greg and I are doing is bring a different resolution. And what was your second question? Sorry, Councillor.
Okay, so just to clarify, so the Treasury policy says that retained earnings must pay down debt or pay off the general rates portion of the Mangawhai wastewater scheme debt, which we have already done at 18 million.
Yes.
Is that what you just said? So then Treasury policy, so what you're saying is that Treasury policy does not allow us to use that surplus as a rates reduction.
Oh, it could be used. No. So one of the reasons you wouldn't want to use it as a rate reduction is that the following year you'd go straight up. So unless you're going to use it, you're going to use it for one-off costs. That would be the only reason you'd want to use it. Otherwise, it's not sensible to, because you'll be shooting the costs up the following year because we may not have retained earnings.
Okay, all right. So that's that. Thank you, Sue. That's helped me a lot. So, Greg, my question for you is: how much in dollar value has the Green Hill Quarry provided to this project?
I'd have to check the exact figures, but I think from memory it was $1 million, just under $1 million of a contract for providing that material.
So, and does that correlate to a representation of savings for the contractor? And once we'd accepted a tender around 3.9 million, 4 million.
We already had
and
those.
awarded.
Yeah, sorry, we already had that all allowed for in our, I suppose, our figures when we were doing that, and having the Green Hill Quarry as an option coming into before we let the contract. So that was part of the value engineering and getting to a point where we could reduce the costs.
So if we accepted a tender of doing the job for 4 million, and then there was $1 million worth of heavy metal provided essentially to the contractor to fulfill the terms, that represents, if the contractor had to purchase it on the private market, $1 million extra benefit. Am I correct?
I would have to double check, sorry, to understand in terms of the original tender that came in, the 5.5 and the timing of that. That original tender, did it allow for the Green Hill Quarry, or was the Green Hill Quarry part of the value engineering process? I'm sorry, I'd have to come back to you.
So just to pick up Councillor Kuno's question about the design phase, the design aspect, I'm just clarifying, was Councillor Kuno's question aimed at the paused or unused phase 2, Poto Road phase 2 design that's sitting there? Is that what she's talking about? Why we can't transfer those funds?
Yes, that's correct.
So the MB contracts, are you saying that there is no flexibility for transference?
And I suppose all contracts are open to interpretation, and I suppose that routing contract agreement 1 is all under one contract, but we sought clarification from MB, and they've declined that offer to move it across. So we've closed the door on that option, really. We've asked the question and they've said no, we can't utilize it for phase 1. It's only for phase 2. That's the agreement we signed with them when we brought in just to do the design phase of phase 2. So they wouldn't allow that to be shifted over.
Okay, thanks, Greg, for your answers. I'm going to finish my questions with the final one about option 3, which is put on page 71, council does not fund this overspend. Work stopped short of completing the sealing to the existing seal. So does that option, if this council were to decide that, does that mean that works done to date would be left to waste? Or does that, yeah?
There's large portions of the project that have been finished already. Section 3 and Section 2 are fully sealed. Parts of Section 1 are sealed. It would mean, I suppose, because we're working back northwards towards the existing seal, that you would have a section between the original seal and the new seal, which wouldn't be sealed. And parts of it may be built up already, but we'd have to go back and halt those works ASAP. And then we would have to have that conversation to understand with MB. In doing that, what does that look like for them, and where do they sit with that? Do they accept that we just couldn't afford to do it all, or do they then try to recover some of the costs that they've put in based on the contractual agreement of saying that you would seal 10 kilometers? So if we said, I imagine that might be more around that conversation. If we could only seal 8 for what we had, and they said you agreed to seal 10, they might pro rata it and say, well, yeah, give me 20% of the cost back of that 5 million. It could be, and that's just me making assumptions. We generally don't know. They might just say it's fine. You can come back
through the chair. No, through the chair. What I'll clarify is no, it won't be fine. They have now said that's the contract. We are either to come back with funding. Or else, yeah, there'd have to be some negotiation, but the money isn't coming from MB. Government isn't putting any more money into these projects.
Right. So just to ascertain that I've understood correctly, we put ourselves at risk of a contractual penalty through the government, the MB, but the works that may have to be declined or not progressed would still render the road improved to a degree, to a standard, because it's there waiting for the seal. So it's not a loss in terms of degeneration of that pavement, because it remains without the.
Yeah, well, parts of it would be, and parts of it just be, because we are working back up in sections. So parts of it would just have maybe some drains cleared or something, but some parts of it could still be the original pavement that we haven't actually built up on yet. So there's elements of how the team's working up to what that would look like.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Answered my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wills. Questions? You're on mute, Councillor Wills. Probably for a very long time you've been on mute. There we are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that we're probably all ready to move on to the next topic, but I do have a couple of questions because of the significance of this. First of all, to Sue, my congratulations on you and the team finding that money within the budget. So I do appreciate that, and that's why we're having such a robust debate, is that I want your staff to see that we don't just spend it willy-nilly because they've worked so hard to actually get it there. My question to you, Sue, though, just for my clarification, if we spend our own money, we're spending the $487,000 flat. If we use the roading money, we're spending roughly $180,000 of our own money and using a $300,000 subsidy, correct?
That's correct.
So if we then put that $300,000, and this is a temporary shortfall, aside, and then reapproach when we redo our annual plan or whatever review with Waka Kotahi, and look to use that funding from then and use that $300,000 as our contribution, could we over the next 3 years recover that loss that we've used elsewhere, or use that funds that we've used elsewhere?
I would suggest, sorry, so just to answer that, over the next 3 years, our funding allocation from NZTA has been locked in through the RLTP, so we have that. Keeping in mind they gave us less for heavy metalling than what we asked for. I think in the long-term plan we asked for 9 million, and they approved 8 million through that process. So the next 3 years, pending them having excess money at the last end of year 3, which can happen, but our budgets are locked in for the next 3 years.
Thank you, Greg. But I'm trying to get, we could use that funding to apply for additional support for, say, cycleways or footpaths or whatever projects at that time is politically supported, putting it that way. We could actually retain that money, if you like, and then use it. We could shift the funds around and get the benefit of the subsidy, but not necessarily this financial year. Is that a potential?
There would have to be another application going into Waka Kotahi for that, because at the moment we've put our application in, they've approved it, so it'll be a variation to our what we have approved in the RLTP. And I wouldn't say no, because as you say, political landscapes change and things change, and opportunities present themselves. But at this point, we're not seeing any noises that there is anything extra from Waka Kotahi or opportunities. The money's been given, and they've been very clear of that's all it is. And given how constrained the process was and the money they had to start with, I'd be very surprised if they did come out and have additional funds going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess I'm just throwing the dice for the last time to see if we can multiply the amount of money we're going to have to commit on this to finish the project. My question is now for you, Greg, and thank you for your explanation before, because that actually did answer a lot of the questions that I might have asked with regard to the over expenditure. My question is around the quarry. First off, Greg, around the quarry. We approved the funding for it to be opened on the basis that it would supply 20 kilometres of metalling for 20 kilometres of tar sealing. The contractor would have applied an average cost against their expected use. Have they had to reforecast against a much lower tonnage coming out of there, and therefore increase their cost of the metal to this project?
I don't know. I know there's conversations, I suppose, with the quarry of still using it for the unsealed section, because if we're not sealing the bottom half of the Poacher Road, we still will then be looking to heavy metal that as a page green site going forward. But I don't know if that conversation's had and it has the rates been prorated down. I don't know. Okay, because I would suggest that considering the significant amount of the cost of the quarry wasn't actually reopening it, that the tonnage rate will have gone up because of the reduced quantity. But anyway, moving on to the next question. One of the first conditions we had with the MB was we had to spend $1 million in a certain time frame to retain their ongoing funding. That $1 million was spent on stages 2 and 3. Was there monitoring to ensure that they didn't? I've known some of the work they did there, and it appeared that they overcapitalized it because the time pressure was on to spend $1 million. Not necessarily to meet our criteria for how much distance they've done for the money involved. I'm not aware, and Vibeke may be able to help me with the contract. I'd have to go back and check, but that there was a time constraint to spend $1 million. The $1 million, in my mind, time constraint came from NZTA, and that was part of our annual plan last year. So we had to spend it by the 30th of June. Because that money wouldn't have been carried over. So that was the only constraint on the $1 million that I was aware of. I'd have to go back and check the contract if there was anything else in there, but I don't recall anything off the top of my head. Because I'll use as an example the fact that that section 3 is the only section that's got concrete curbing on it, for example, as an extra spend compared to the other stages. Anyway, moving on. The $200,000 allocated for the extra spend, as a regular user of the Poto Road, there was a considerable time lag between the work they did to prepare it to tar seal standard and actually commencing the tar seal process. And in that time, that road being a sand-based road deteriorated, and then they had to come back and repatch it and refix it, which has led to that, to a degree, to this $200,000 extra cost. How was that project timeframe managed to minimise that additional cost that we've now ended up having to look at funding? Contractually, the funding we're asking isn't coming from the timing of the project and the deterioration of the pavement prior to sealing. Contractually, the contractor is required to get up to a level, and if they own the risk of if that road sits unsealed for a month because of bad weather or whatever it may be, that sits with them. So then they have to bring it back up to the level again, one of the design levels, and to the quality and the saturation level. So we and an engineer's rep wouldn't approve sealing until that road was ready to be sealed, because if we did, then we would start having maintenance issues going forward. So the 200,000 wouldn't be related to any deterioration of work that the contractor was doing and then letting it sit there prior to sealing.
Okay, and I've got other comments, but they're not questions, so I'll stop. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Sue, for your answers.
Thank you. Thank you. There is still an opportunity for statements. So I have a question for Vibeke. And Vibeke, this is back in your PGF hat days. And the simple question is, when it comes to council projects, normally was a financial contribution expected from the councils up front, pretty much universally across New Zealand, everywhere? Was it always part of the PGF projects?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm only familiar really with the details of contracts between MB and Council up here in Taitokara, not so much across the country. But thinking back, yes, in general, where there were PGF, and just stressing this is PGF, not the IRG funding, but PGF generally did have a co-funding requirement, but all of the allocations were done pretty much on a case-by-case basis. So it always looked at the particular circumstances of the project and the council and its resources. So I'm afraid that I can't give a more detailed answer than saying in general there was usually a co-funding component involved.
Thank you, because there has been relatively little co-funding by Kaipara District Council of any of its PGF related projects. So thank you for helping illuminate that as well. That things are different here, but maybe we're catching up to everyone else. So elected members, are there further questions for clarification? I'm aware that this has gone for 55 minutes as well. It should, because it's important that we cast light into all of the corners here. So are we happy to move on from questions at this point? Yes, thank you. Right, so statements. So as the mover of this item, as I've said at the top of the item, so thank you, Greg, and thank you, Sue. And Vibeke, thank you. As I said at the top of this item, this is a really regrettable situation that we're in, and having to find money that we never thought we were going to have to find. However, I'd like to commend Sue and Greg, and particularly Sue, for having found in the retained earnings pocket of council, if you like, an opportunity for us to do this with minimal impact on the ratepayers. So it's an imperfect situation that we're in, but I see option one as the best of the three options that we have before us. I believe that to reduce the levels of service on 10 kilometres of heavy metalling across the rest of our roading network in the district would be unacceptable. And I also believe that not to proceed with attempting to complete the sealing of this project would would be a total failure by the council to follow through with its contractual obligations to MB and also to the community here. When we have an opportunity, as challenging as it may be, to see this job right, I believe we should take it rather than risk blowing up the entire story here. So I'd like to thank Sue for presenting us with a pathway through this, and Greg, thank you. Councillor Curnow, thank you as the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I echo your sentiment. That's regrettable that we're in this. However, I sort of during the break I did a little bit of number crunching, and I'm not the best mathematician, but it looks to me like only about 5% of this overrun is stuff that maybe we could have had a better handle on. I mean, things like more fill than expected. When you're, as anyone who's ever done any building work knows, when you lift the floor, you find the piles are rotten, and when you try and redo the piles, you find you've not got the right ground conditions to put new piles in. So there's, you know, when you actually start work, there is always going to be additional costs, which is why you have contingencies. And the MSQA thing, I mean, that's to do with the economic climate that we're in, that COVID, that all these additional projects, people being tempted away and leaving us with $100,000 bill as a result of that. And the archaeological and cultural monitoring took longer. We found stuff that we probably hoped we weren't going to find along the way. And so for me, the big lesson there is that in this current economic, employment market, we need to probably be more generous with our contingency funds, because we should expect for things to overrun, for the unforeseen to happen. So the unforeseen is kind of foreseeable now. And so fortunately, we're in a position that we have the retained earnings, and that using them will not impact on our projected annual plan. That gives me some comfort. I don't want to go down the route of using our heavy metaling budget, because we're in the space of trying to fix our unsealed roading network right now. And to me, to sort of be fixing it with one hand and undermining it with another just doesn't make sense. And finally, my final point is, and I think the Mayor touched on this, is that reputation is really important when it comes to getting this external funding. And in the future, at some point, there will be additional funding, whether we're here or not to claim it or not. But that reputation of being able to deliver and follow through and actually make things happen. So I would not want to see us default on our contract, because that would affect our chances in the future of being able to get money, assuming we're here. So yeah, it's regrettable, but I do support the motion that we go with the retained earnings option.
Thank you. Councillor Wills, statement.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Withy.
Yeah, always regrettable to have to approve funds that we weren't expecting to. I just want to make a couple of points to this conversation. One is, if we don't approve it, I know that road really well. It's a sand-based road. If we don't tar seal it and complete what they've done, it will deteriorate back to the point it was before we spent the money. It's not a case of preserving what we're spending, it will actually lose it. Bearing in mind that this 9.8 kilometres was originally approved for tar sealing as the first stage, because it was heavily used by logging trucks, which had destroyed the metal road. And that's why it gained the PGF funding to start with. So it's not like this is making it difficult for holiday makers or tourists. This is actually to support the logging industry down at Poto Point, or to compensate for the amount of traffic that flows from down there. Other thing is that I've heard several comments about how the project's almost completed. Having just travelled on that road recently, I don't agree with that statement. Section 3 and 2 have been tar sealed, and Section 1 they're only just starting. So you're talking out of 9.8 kilometres, probably still 6 or 7 kilometres hasn't been tar sealed. I just bring that up that it's because it's a suggestion being made that it's almost done and dusted. It's not. They've still got quite a bit of tar sealing work ahead of them, and if we don't get on with it or any hesitation, like I said, we're at risk of losing that base that's we've already spent money and it's done. So yeah, I support. And I again reiterate my appreciation of Sue and the team and the other staff that have found savings in their different departments to help us do this.
Thank you. Councillor Weddy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess this comes as quite a disappointment to me. I think most elected members will remember many occasions in the early stages of this project that we said, don't come back to council for extra money. You've got to do it for the number of kilometres you can get out of the PGF on the money that we've got available externally. In spite of the external funding, if you look at the little table that Greg's provided here, with the fact that council will be contributing $500,000 for the second seal, which is definitely part of the project, and contributing up to $1 million through other ways with heavy metaling, etc. And in addition, and what's not been taken into account in these figures, but Greg's already admitted to it, is that there have been other council resources used, which is cross-subsidisation. I've raised this matter early on, that no business of usual resources should be put into these projects without being costed in correctly. But if you don't cost them in correctly, it's cross-subsidisation. The Deputy Mayor's talked about reputational damage. I agree that we don't want to have reputational damage with MB. We have a contractual obligation and we should fulfil that. But we also have a lot of other reputational potential damage. I've got people climbing down my throat regularly who live on 2 areas that are of high expansion, areas that are going into lifestyle blocks which are creating a lot more rates revenue for council, and they are in areas which either have spasmodic amounts of seal. I refer to Settlement Road out of Kaiwaka. It's gone from sealed road, unsealed road, sealed road, unsealed road, sealed road, unsealed road, as you go right down the length of it. They've lived with that for years and they're pissed off with it because they want it fully sealed. And that level is taking, that road area is taking off in terms of new properties being put in. The other one, of course, which many people are aware of, is the area of Lawrence Road, which again is getting a lot of current visibility. That starts off as unmetalled, then it goes to about 1 kilometre or more of sealed, and then unmetalled again. Now, if we prop up out of money that would otherwise be dispersed across the district for this extra bit of roading, because we've blown out the budget largely because we didn't put enough contingencies on there, then how's our reputation with the rest of the people within our district going to look? We've already got, in my mind, and it may not be in anyone else's, a reputational issue with the fact that on our unsealed roading project that we've just looked at earlier in this meeting, out of 105 roads that are mentioned to getting corrective treatment under that budget, 9 of them come from the Mangawhai Kaiwaka area, 9 out of 105. And of that 9, 1 is only at design stage, 1 is not started, and 1 is only a contingency, so may not even take place. So what I'm seeing here is that, okay, we've got a contractual problem. So my suggestion is that we try and ring fence this thing, and we've got to do this. Otherwise, if we don't ring fence some of these projects, we're going to find that we're cross-subsidising from all the other projects we've got going on. That we should be looking at the only part of the retained earnings that Sue's indicated is available is the 300-odd thousand that came from the the unspent roading projects. Now, if we leverage our subsidy from NZT on that, we may be able to get through. We may not be able to get it in the right time frame. That isn't necessarily a problem because Sue will be well aware you can actually, if you like, put up money up front from whether it be retained earnings or not, but then claw it back and put it back in the pot so that over a period of 2 or 3 years, there hasn't been a if you like, a discounting of the available retained earnings for all the other other areas within the council expenditure that we could have put it. I'm not comfortable with going and saying we're just going to take the whole lot out of retained earnings, only out of the bit that is from the unspent roading budget. And even that, I believe, is a very sympathetic view of this covering the overrun, because in fact, if that unspent 300,000 from roading had been apportioned as we would probably apportion it, we would apportion it across the roading across the district, not just down one peninsula. So it's already getting cross subsidy from the rest of the district's roading budget. So that's the way I go. I'd far rather see the recommendation amended so that not out of retained earnings, out of the roading component of the retained earnings, and to proceed down the path of getting the NZD to put in their contribution in terms of subsidy. But otherwise, I think this is not a good look, full stop. I think we've got to finish the project. I've got no doubt about that. How we do it and how we get out of it without having huge reputational damage across the district, that's the big question mark. So, I don't know whether we're up for amending that recommendation to put it more specifically rather than just the broad brush retained earnings definition, which seems a bit open to my way of thinking. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Wethy, and you were over time there, but thank you for your statement. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
Okay, thank you. I do not support this. My solution is to go back to MP and ask for the Poto Road Phase 2 design budget to be used for the shortfall, and here's my crucial word, the budget overspend. So our job as elected members is not to accede to every request for extra dollars of ratepayers' dollars when there is budget overruns. And I can note the most egregious was the fit out of the NRC building that council will be renting, which ran 3 times over budget. Then we've got the Mangawhai wastewater balance tank, 1.5 million, ended up 5 million. So, and then the last time this council convened, the majority decided to put up our rates by 7.59% on average in a time of inflation, in a time of hardship. I have lived in Poto for nearly 3.5 years. I know it is isolated. I know how significant a seal project is for the commuters, for the residents, for the forestry, and for the tourists. But my job here is to do good governance, and my job is to hold our elected, our chief executive to account for the delivery of these projects. And so I also push back strongly on the use of 300k of roading for other projects that was earmarked, that is taking once again from another area of our council and losing the opportunity to attract the FAR subsidy, which would bring that up to about $1 million. Plus, thank you, Councillor Wethy. Once again, you've used your sharp financial acumen to draw attention to the actual hidden use of ratepayers' dollars for this project, drawing from other resources, the Quarry, for example, and the heavy metalling budget from the other parts of the Unsealed road network. So my vote against is a clear, strong message that we will not tolerate budget overruns, and that some other way other than the ratepayers' pocket has to be found to get this project finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further statements? No further statements. Right, going once, twice. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we'll be
Mr. Mayor,
sorry.
would you consider an amendment to that?
Councillor, you've spoken. Thank you.
Okay.
So, yep, thank you. And so at this point, I'm about to make the closing statement at this point because no one else wanted to speak. So here is the simple point. I commend again Sue for having found in the retained earnings, okay, a way that this project can be continued and completed without it impacting on our ratepayers. All right, so any notion of us abandoning this project
Point
now,
of order, Mr. Mayor.
what is your point of order, Councillor De La Varis Woodcock?
If you use retained earnings, that's taking $300,000 from the roading budget. That isn't definitely impacting on
Sorry,
our
what is your
ratepayers.
point of order? Sorry, Councillor De La Varis
You-
Woodcock, what is your point of order?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you made an inaccurate, misleading statement.
So Councillor De La Varis Woodcock, thank you for your comment. I did not make a misleading statement, thank you, and I will continue with my closing comment, thank you. So the important point here is that any decision to abandon this project right now would be the very, very wrong moment to do so, especially considering the financial tools that Sue has put in place for us, which is in this recommendation. So this is a regrettable situation. It's not ideal at all, but the point that I'm making here is that there is no impact onto the future projects of the council in us making a decision in this space today. So the important point here, as I say, is that we are a long way through a project. As we heard from Vibeke, the government normally demanded a large contribution from councils for projects such as this, and for Kaipara, because we're a special case, we didn't have to provide that when this project was put together in 2018. And that's important for us to remember here. So the opportunity for us still remains clear, and keeping faith with the project that we've set out to do is important at this time. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions. And this is one of those. And the fact that we've spent an hour on this item shows just how much all the elected members care, and not everyone here has spoken, and some have spoken a lot. So it's important, as far as I'm concerned, that we draw this matter now to a close and make a decision here on this item. Thank you. So at that, we're going to put this to the vote for the recommendation and the motion as written. So all those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. So that's 5 that I can see. Thank you. 6. Thank you. And all those against, please raise your hand and say no.
No.
2. Right. So that's 6 to 2. So the motion is passed. Thank you.
Can I call for a division, please, Mr. Mayor?
So a division on this item has been called. Thank you.
I'll do that for you. Just give me one moment. Councillor Curnow.
That was 4. Sorry. She's on
Oh,
mute.
sorry. Sorry, can you all unmute and I'll just do the division for you? Thank you. I do need a vocal for this. 4. Councillor De La Varis Woodcock.
Against.
Councillor Joyce Paki. Councillor Joyce Paki.
4. She's saying 4.
Okay. Councillor Vincent. 4.
4. Sorry.
Try and use your vocal, please, because then it will be recorded as well for the public. Councillor
4.
Wethy.
Against.
Councillor Wills.
4.
Councillor Wilson Collins.
4.
Mayor Smith.
4.
It is 6 for, 2 against. The motion's carried.
Thank you. Thank you. So, right. So we'll keep moving on with our agenda because we're at page, right now, I'm on page 73 of the agenda and it's 121 pages long. So we were due to be finishing the meeting in 10 minutes. We're not going to do that, are we? We're going to carry on. So, right. Thank you. Poto Road Phase 2 project update. This is, of course, the project that we've just talked about that isn't going to lend us any money to pay for Poto Road Phase 1. Councillor Curnow, you're happy to move this, and I'm seeking a seconder for this. I'll second this. Thank you. Put it onto the table. Thank you. So, Vibeke. You're on mute. Thank you. And your microphone's up in the air, maybe.
It was up in the air, my apologies. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Poto Road Phase 2. This is drawing its way to a conclusion with the finalisation of the design and obviously a bit delayed as a result of COVID and particularly the geotech investigation. But otherwise the report is more or less as reported, but happy to take any questions.
Elected members, are there any questions on this item? No questions. Thank you, Vibeke. You may stand down. Thank you. So, Deputy Mayor Curnow, statement.
No real comment on it. The project is nearly finished. It was affected by the COVID lockdown, and there doesn't appear to be any significant risk to its completion, and then it can just sit on the shelf until we can find some money.
Thank you. No statement here from me. Are there any further statements from elected members? No further statements. Thank you, Councillor Curnow. Do you want a closing statement?
Nothing to add.
No, thank you. We'll put this to the vote now. The noting of this report. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Moving on, swiftly on. Waipoua River Road project update, page 79. And I'm seeking a mover for this item. Trying to spread this around the table. Councillor Joyce Paki, thank you. And a seconder for this, Councillor Wills. Thank you. Vibeke.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are green boxes across the scheduled budget risks and issues, so therefore I don't have anything to add, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Curnow, question. You're on mute.
Sorry, I put my hand up, but I didn't unmute. Just thinking about the ongoing discussions between Te Roroa Dock and KDC around vesting the completed road. It's marked in green, so obviously nobody's worried about it, but I'm just wanting to know where we're at with that. Like, is that it's still progressing? And yeah.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, it is still progressing. It hasn't yet been completely resolved, but we are confident of making progress.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Councillor.
Hearing about that progress. Yeah.
Councillor Vincent, question.
Sorry, my question just got answered.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for clarification here regarding Waipoa River Road? All right, thank you. Thank you, Vibeke. So Councillor Joyce Paki, statement. Are you on mute, please? No.
I think, yeah, Councillor Joyce Parky sometimes has trouble with her sound. And this looks like one of those days, unfortunately.
Speaking again, Councillor Joyce Paki. Right, all right. Sorry, I'm just going to go to Tracy here. From a procedural point of view, if Councillor Joyce Paki is unable to speak here, then we ought to have a different mover for this item.
We could, unless you want to adjourn, but I see that we're later in the day, adjourn to see if we can correct her sound, potentially.
We probably do need a break, actually, just for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Yes, what we'll do, thank you, Tracy. So we'll take an adjournment now, just for 5 minutes. We'll resume at 4 p.m. And then hopefully this technology matter will be fixed. And if not, we'll find another solution. Thank you. Resuming 5 minutes. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Tracy, are you there?
I am. We are just live at
Ah,
the moment, so I'm just going to
okay.
just
I'm back on.
give you a call. Oh, you're back on? Awesome.
Well, you can hear me,
Wonderful.
so
I can
I
hear you,
must be
so
back
let's do
on.
that and perhaps leave your
Cool.
video off. That would be good, and that's good. And you can, yeah, just don't mute
Cool.
just at the moment. Thank you.
Ka pai.
Councillor Joyce Parky, would you just like to speak for us and see if that's working still?
Kia ora.
Wonderful, thank you. Just
Hey.
checking.
I was doing
Wonderful.
so well. I was doing
You
so
were
well.
doing very well. Thank you, Your Worship. We have sound back.
Very good. Thank you. That's excellent. So we can proceed with Councillor Joyce Parky making her statement here regarding Waipoua River Road. Thank you.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thanks for the report. It's pretty short and sharp. There's lots of green on it, which makes me happy. And I do appreciate the question that was asked around the handing over of the road and where that will. That's been dragging on for some time, so a resolution around that would be great. But yeah, nothing further.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wills.
Thanks.
Nothing to add. Thank you. Are there any further statements regarding Waipoua River Road from elected members here? No further statements? All right. Thank you. So at this point, we will move to the vote regarding receiving and noting this report. So all those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to page 87 of today's agenda, the Kaipara Wharves project update. And I'm seeking Councillor Wills is wanting to move this. Thank you. And I'm seeking a seconder for this item. I'm happy to second this. Thank you. Put that onto the table. Vibeka, over to you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Pahi Wharf is basically complete. With Poto, we have run into an issue in respect of the original siting for the wharf, and the contract original siting recommended a relocation, which I understand is a short distance away, which would bring the project back within budget. We have reached out to consult with iwi on that relocation and are awaiting feedback, and in fact asked the contractor to quantify the benefits of the move as well. So sort of a moving space at this point, and obviously we'll be reporting next month on progress, but that's the state of play at the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, a question.
Yes, thank you, Vibeka. My question is, which entity pays for the Pahi Wharf slime removal? Is that the Pahi Club or is that a maintenance cost for KDC ratepayers?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm very sorry. I'm not sure who pays for the slime reduction. I will do some research and report back to you.
Thank you, Vibeka. And another question, what should happen if the Poto Wharf beach landing proposal option cost exceeds the budget?
Through you, Your Worship, the beach landing budget was reallocated to Poto by way of a variation.
Oh, sorry, not beach
that
landing.
was quite some months ago.
Sorry, I used the wrong word. So from the Fisherman's Rock being over budget, and the new proposal is to reposition the proposed wharf and reduce the size of it. So I didn't mean beach landing, I meant the site of the former old wharf is now proposed for the new wharf in order to meet the budget. But my question is, what would happen if that is approved and then we get a budget overrun? Where would the extra money come from? Would it be like the last item or the item prior with the Poto Seal Phase 1, where we have to use KDC ratepayers' dollars?
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that this was a design build contract, and so the contractor has been involved in the design and has made the recommendation for the relocation in order to fit within the allocated budget. In other words, the proposed relocation should be within the established budget.
Right, that's what I thought. Thank you. Those are my questions answered.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification regarding the Kaipara Wharves project? And where Councillor Wills.
Thank you. Sorry, that you just made a statement that it was a design build project, the Poto Wharf, and that it should meet the budget. But isn't that the same contractor that did the original design plan project, but then couldn't meet the budget? Is it not the same contractor that we originally entered negotiations with?
Through you, Your Worship, so I'm not familiar with all of the details, but my understanding is that the location was established, then the contractor was brought on board and asked to do the design of the physical structure, and that's when it was revealed that it couldn't be done within budget, and they have made the recommendation that if the relocation is done, then it would fit within budget. But that's my understanding, and I'd like to double check that with the project manager and just confirm that with you later.
I appreciate that confirmation because the Poto Wharf is becoming an ongoing bit of a joke. There was a plan sent out to us of a relocated wharf. Can you confirm that wharf was the size of the original projected proposal?
Through you, Your Worship.
Sorry,
no, I can't confirm that now.
Just for Vibeka's clarity there, this was an email that was sent to all of the elected members by Brodie Stopforth, I'm going to say a week ago from memory, and it included a description of the changes to the overall project and an aerial photograph of the site, including a different looking wharf in a new location, if you like, right there, 10 meters away from the old locations, but nevertheless a new location. And so this is what we are talking to, is that email that was just sent last week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is that email inferred or highly suggested that any saving in the cost was to do with the relocation. I'm asking for confirmation that the overall design, apart from its relocation, is the same as what we originally approved for the budget that we allocated to this job. And I appreciate you might not be able to answer it, but I'm asking you to make notes that you can answer it in the future, because I don't like us being given only half a story and expected to make a decision on that basis. Please.
Yep. My understanding, through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that the overall specification remains the same and is not changed. How it will actually be engineered is only going to be fleshed out once we finalise the design for that relocation.
So I'd ask you to confirm that, because that one we're just talking about now is 12 meters long and only has the boardwalk out to it. So it's quite a significantly different sized project than what was originally approved. But the email completely overlooked that and just focused on the relocation.
Understood. I'll come back and report back. So just to clarify, you're asking, will the relocated wharf perform the same, still have the same depth and accommodate the same number of boats?
Yes,
and
provide the level of access that was provided for by the original wharf, please. Because yeah, if there's any chopping and changing there, that should also be brought to our attention for our decision, please. My next question is that I've read your report, thank you, and I appreciate you and you on the job. have we got any definitive timelines that we can get a response from environs and from the community so that we can actually get on with this project before winter, rather than risk, because I see if we don't, we're at risk of losing the funding if we run into start construction after winter. Has that been emphasised to, for example, environs? And how much authority has been allocated to that advisory group as opposed to brought back to us at the council as elected members?
Through you, Your Worship, to address your first question, my understanding is that iwi has been asked to respond within 2 weeks, and they have undertaken to do that. And can I just ask you to repeat your second question? I didn't quite follow you.
My concern with this project in particular is that the decisions that are being made with regard to its budget and its design and has been delegated to an advisory board rather than, and they're making a number of decisions that we may not agree to as a council. But the authority seems to have been shifted from us, but we're still left holding responsibility for the funding and any downside risks.
Well, through you, Your Worship, I'm not in a position to clarify or to explain the decision making that has occurred prior to my arrival at Kaipara District, but I'll certainly research that and come back to you. But as far as I'm aware, the decision making has been done within the appropriate delegated authority for the project.
So, and I'd also like to say, Councillor Wills, that is maybe part of your statement that you're making, perhaps rather than a question as well, when we get to our statements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, your little yellow hand is still flying. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do you
Yes,
have
I did.
So you have another question, yeah?
I do, thanks.
Okay.
So Vibeke, I don't expect you to answer this, but I just wanted to ask it for your to come back to the next meeting. In the Pahi Wharf, there's an amber about the boat owners' dissatisfaction with the protection of the pontoon edge, damaging their vessels. And I had heard in my mind there's the similar issue, I may be wrong, but with the Dargaville pontoon, which is now marked as complete. And I just wondered, could you please clarify and ascertain if that's also correct, because it could be something that both pontoons should have the same standard of excellence. So hope that's clear.
Yep. Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I'll follow up and check whether or not we've had any complaints and what's involved in that back.
Thank you, Vibeke.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? I have a question for clarification, and it's on page 93 of the overall agenda here, and it's about the Poto Wharf construction commencement. We had a January 22nd milestone for construction, and it's now likely to commence in May, it says here. I go back to a point Councillor Wills just made. What is the risk here that all of the funding gets taken off us and central government just goes, you're too late. You're simply way, way, way too late here for this project?
So the project delays were discussed at the operations steering group, and I think the NB representatives there are aware of the challenges that the project has faced. Speaking with reference to my experience, I think where a project has been sufficiently well advanced, the risk is reasonably low. But for certainty, certainly happy to just have a special conversation with the staff at MB and just provide some comfort that we're not at risk.
Thank you. That would be very good. And for the next written report, please. Thank you. Are there any further questions at this time? No further questions. Thank you. Right, Councillor Wills.
Thanks, Mayor. No, sorry, I've just realised that with our inside track to MB, we should get every advantage of any council possible in New Zealand. But it's pleasing to see that other than the Poto Wharf, the progress that's been made. It's disheartening with Poto because it was part of a package to do with the tar sealing, and each of the components is slowly slipping through our fingers. I was asked to keep this to my statement rather than a question. I am concerned with the Poto Wharf project, and I'm bringing it to the attention of the council that there seems to be a lot of communication within the advisory group and the contractors and staff that I know it's operational, but we as a council are not being kept up to date with progress or lack thereof. And I just ask that to be noted, that as a councillor, I want to know if we're not going to meet milestones or we're not going to meet deadlines, that we be made more frequently aware of that than our EFF meetings, if that's required in the future, as we get closer and closer to the end of the funding and these projects, as they become more at risk of us losing that money, as mentioned by the Mayor previously. But also that the staff be aware, or whoever's given us these presentations, that we be given all of the information, not just what they want us to see or hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The statement from me is that since the last meeting, of course, we've had the opening of the Pahi Wharf, and it's been absolutely smashing. Literally smashing. It's great to do manu bombs off it, and I've loved that all summer, and maybe there even today. And also boats have been being smashed on it, as the local boat drivers are actually not used to having a pontoon. And it's been very interesting for the local boat building industry that has actually had to help many people. So notwithstanding the challenges of that, these are kind of growing pains for our Kaipara harbour and our use of the harbour, and looking forward to the we'll call it rubber bollard protectors, if you like, to help our local boat owners from not putting holes in their boats. It is important for us all, and it will be the same for Poto, of course. We don't want any boats being holed at Poto. It would be even more serious than at Pahi or anywhere else. And but the important thing here is that these projects keep moving on. I'm very concerned about the delays with the Poto Wharf, and very, very keen for this to be expedited, knowing that we're in this COVID environment and the costs of everything are spiraling upwards, and this is an extremely remote location for a very, very important piece of infrastructure. As I've said before, Poto Point is the closest point of Northland to the Auckland Sky Tower as the seagull flies, for all of Northland and for Kaipara District as well. And so the connection by sea for that place is the very center of its Māori. And so I'm very keen that this project is completed as quickly as possible. I'm alarmed at seeing that construction may now commence in May, and I'm hoping that that can be sooner. So here's all speed to this. Thank you. Are there any further statements? No further statements. Councillor Wills, you're allowed a closing statement if you wish.
No further statement.
All right, thank you. So we're putting this to the vote now of the noting of this report. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Page 99, Dargaville to Te Kopuru Stop Bank Project update. I'm seeking a mover for this item. Councillor Curnow, thank you. And a seconder. Councillor Vincent, thank you. Rebecca.
Thank you. So the schedule is slightly amber on this project, but the project manager does expect that the time can be made up during the design phase and that there won't be any impact to the requirement to, not the requirement, sorry, the plans construction start date in October 2023. There is a minor budget risk of 52,000, and again we're negotiating with the consultant, so should hopefully reach a good outcome on that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Curnow.
Yeah, I noted under the community engagement and consultation that iwi are feeling the pressure a bit of all these projects and having to engage with us on all of them. Is there anything that we can do to work in a different way that makes it easier for them? I mean, yeah, maybe, I don't know, dealing with things as a block of projects. I can understand their pressure, and yeah, just wonder if there's anything we can do.
So through you, Your Worship, the iwi are represented on the operations steering group, but it is just a comment from the perspective of coming new to this. It does appear that the demands on iwi and hapu are quite significant. I, in fact, today was asking about whether or not we had a Māori engagement. So I think the question is possibly a governance one rather than a staff one, but certainly offer that observation.
Yeah, certainly I can understand the pain that will be coming out of this. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we need to take that up in a different forum about how do we engage effectively with Māori on the barrage of projects that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification regarding this Stop Bank project? No further questions. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. So statements here, Councillor Curnow. Thank you.
I don't really have much to say about this. It's in the early stages, and so far it's looking relatively under control. So nothing much to say about it other than I do think we need to think about how we engage with iwi and create less load and more effectiveness and less load.
Yep. Thank you. And Councillor Vincent, statement. Thank you.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong mouse. I have no great concerns about this project as long as we recognise that suddenly we go from having plenty of time to make up time to running out of time. This can happen when you've got a perception of having lots of time. I love deadlines myself, trying to keep me in line. So hopefully this project can maintain the discipline of getting back on track, and from that slight wobble that appears it's in prospect, I've said no. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further statements from elected members here? Thank you. No further statements. Councillor Curnow, closing statement.
Nothing further to add.
Nothing. Thank you. All right. Okay, we're putting this to the vote now, the noting of this project. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the Raupō upgrade project update. And I'm seeking a mover for this item. Councillor Vincent, thank you. And a seconder here. I'll do that. All right, thank you. Vibeke, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to note a couple of corrections, please. Or comments in addition to the report. The schedule is noted as amber. However, variation has been executed with amber to extend the start of the construction works so that should now move to green. The second paragraph there where it says the budget is amber as a result from going from direct point to tender, it is in fact green as accurately shown in the table above, and the risks and issues has also been incorrect. If you look at page 109, the risks and issues are in fact either green or closed. So apologies for those errors, but otherwise happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for clarification? Councillor De La Varas Woodcock.
Yes, my question is, what does the acronym RFIP used in terms of project procurement refer to or mean?
Request for indicative, what does the P stand for?
Proposal?
Request for information, sorry, request for information proposal.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further questions, elected members? No, right. So we're looking forward to all those green boxes continuing then. Thank you. Statements here. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to, sorry. Sorry about that. I'm keen to see this project proceed. It's been a long time coming from I understand, a very old idea, and now its time has come, and looks like it's proceeding in an orderly way. So I wish the best for it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And seconding statement from me is I'm pleased to see all the green boxes here, and I hope the management of this project runs smoothly for its duration. Thank you. Further statements, elected members? No further statements. Thank you. Councillor Vincent, a closing statement?
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're putting this to the vote now. All those in favour noting this, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Thank you. So we're moving now to our final couple of items here, the externally funded projects financial overview, which is the simple summary of all of the finances at play here. I'm seeking someone,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor De La Varas Woodcock, thank you, and a seconder here for this. The noting of this, I'll second that, thank you. Vibeke, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I must confess that I was not involved in the collation of this report. While I'm happy to take any questions, may be a case that either Sue can answer them or I can report back to the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there questions, elected members? Once, yes. Twice, no
Sorry,
questions.
Yep. Me.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson-Collins, thank you.
Sorry, I sent a question in, I'm pretty sure, about the financial overview. Just asking if if there was any chance it could have the same color coding as the project overview, just so we had a snapshot of, yeah.
Yep. Through you, Your Worship. You're absolutely right, and I apologise. I actually thought that you were referring to the next item on the agenda, but yes, certainly no problem at all to incorporate that information into either the financial overview or the program update, which occurs later as the final item.
Yeah, the program update.
We'll start that next month.
Yeah, the program update is already color coded, but yeah, I think the financial overview, if that was color coded as well, would just give a nice snapshot. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there further questions, elected members, for clarification? No further questions. Of course, this is a summary document. Thank you, Vibeke. Councillor Dilavaris Woodcock, statement.
Yes, I just would like to point out that it's very useful to have the column budget spent to date, and it's a quick snapshot of each of the projects and where we're at, particularly with expenditure. So great to have that simple table and nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your suggestion, Councillor Wilson-Collins, of adding the extra colours so that it lines up with the other table as well. It's helpful to make these tools useful for us all. That's my statement. Any further statements from elected members? No, thank you. Right, Councillor Dilavaris Woodcock, would you like a closing statement?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we're putting this to the vote now. All those in favour of noting this,
Aye.
please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Moving on, final item of the agenda is the program update, where everything comes together into a timeline. So I'm seeking someone to move this item, please. Councillor Kerno, thank you, and a seconder here. I'll second that. Keep us rolling along. Thank you, Vibeke.
Thank you, Worship. As with the previous report, I was not personally involved in preparing this one. I say I like this report, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Elected members, are there any questions of Vibeke regarding the project overview, knowing that we've gone through in great detail the everything of everything? No questions, thank you. Right, so statements, Deputy Mayor.
Just that this overview gives us a good view of the extent of the work that's being undertaken on behalf of council at the moment, council and our communities. There are going to be lots of events that may or may not happen, given where we're at, but hopefully that doesn't mean that there's not lots of projects that actually get finished on their due date. Because if they do, then we've got a very busy and very productive year ahead of us.
Thank you. Statement from me is this project, this chart on page 117 of the agenda is particularly useful in helping to line us up with where we fit in one visual snapshot with the financial year, also with where the Omicron and COVID is expected to be running in the community, and also where future years are looking to be as well. It is particularly helpful. I'm seeing a very busy autumn period for the council and the council project team, and so I'm very mindful of everyone keeping safe during a really key time, so that we are delivering all these opening events and completion events, which are indicated here, before the end of this financial year, and for us to be rolling ahead, and growing a better kaipara. Thank you. Further statements? No further statements. Thank you, Councillor Curnow. Deputy Mayor, closing statement from you, if you so wish. No, right, thank you. All right, so we'll put this report to the vote now. All those in favour of noting this report, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of today's agenda, and it's been a very long meeting actually. That's three and a half hours long, but it's been very constructive for us, and it's our first really big meeting of the year actually as well. So at this point, I won't prolong the meeting any longer. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I'd like to congratulate Vibeke on getting through today and all your first landing with us here, and in the new role as the overall project communication coordinator with us here. So thank you for your project management skills. I'm about to close with a karakia, please, and wishing everyone well for the rest of the day. Thank you. Kia tōna manakitanga a te mea ngaro ki runga ki teina tātou kia mehia te hua makihi kihi kia toitaku pi toita mana toita araha toita reo Māori ti hei Māori ora.
Kia ora.